Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the hollow where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Boom! Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, located directly inside America. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, JJ Vance here, host of Operation GCD, and perhaps most notably, not the vice president. Oop, right there, somewhere on the screen. There we go. Boom. Anyhow, thanks for joining me here tonight, folks of the interwebs. I will be your pilot and navigator for tonight's shenanigan infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And I got a real barn burner here on deck for you folks here tonight. Robin Hood, a Knights Templar tale. Now, this is probably a new idea for many folks, despite being familiar with the some iteration of the story of Robin Hood, given the common remakes of that film over the years in Hollywood, from cartoons to Kevin Costner films to Mel Brooks musical versions of the film, musical parodies of the story Robin Hood Men in Tights, one of Dave Chappelle's early moments in Hollywood. Anyhow, this is a story often repeated, but not repeated properly. And because really what this story tells is a story of the Knights Templar and how their land was stolen and given back to the Vatican by King John, the antagonist of the story of there in Robin Hood. And while the Templar were away on the crusades, just like Robin Hood, Robin of Locksley returns back from the crusades. And this is where we get the Magna Carta, even though they leave that part out of the story. But it's interesting that we have this story that is so popular in our, especially in America. That's this tale of Robin Hood. But thanks for joining me here, folks of the interwebs. Join me here tonight to get a little GCD. And we did have two guests here tonight, or from the Third World Assassin YouTube channel, Clint and Lee. However, I was excited to have Lee on tonight too, because he's a British fella who's now an American, but he would have an interesting perspective on all these matters, as we've discussed some of these things over on Clint's YouTube channel, Third World Assassin. But anyhow, welcome to the show. Welcome to Operation GCD there, Clint.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back. Welcome back to Operation GCD. Oh, nice. Welcome back to Operation GCD. That is. What were your thoughts on the new? I think I got it started that theme song about 6 weeks ago now, but yeah, it's fairly new. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, it reminded me of doing construction work when I was young in the 90s.
Yeah, sneaking away. Some older style country, some older style bluegrass and country.
Yeah,
yeah, dude, it sucks that Lee couldn't make it tonight, but that's unfortunate because these are things you and I and Lee have discussed on your show before. These matters of the Magna Carta, the Knights Templar, how it's relevant today with the U.S. Constitution, matters relative to today, all these things and the liberties established by both of these contractual documents. But it's not even just the liberties; it is literally the same families that are involved in both of these disputes of liberty in the Magna Carta and the U.S. Constitution, 500 plus years apart, right? So we're talking 1215 to essentially 1776, if you want to ballpark it. So these things are very interesting to me, and I think very relevant today. And it's certainly you're a man who appreciates the U.S. Constitution and liberty in general, as I've as we've discussed many hours over there on your show. So I know you've been here before on Operation GCD, but if you don't mind, please introduce yourself there, Clint, and your ongoing endeavors to educate other folks on liberties for many years there on YouTube.
The Constitution and creator endowed rights protected by the Constitution are to be supreme law of the land. Any law in conflict is notwithstanding. Bears no power to enforce, no obligation to obey.
Yeah, is that a Bill Cooper quote?
That's the Carl Miller line. They talk about the government erroneously abridging on citizens' rights and so on and so forth. On my channel, I talk about one of my first things I got in a conspiracy with was about gold and silver coins and what is U.S. currency and what is the dollar, and which the dollar is 24 grams of silver, and the it's like the New World Order had taken its agent provocateurs and literally deleted JFK, and then that's when, well, I don't know if he was part of them or what, but that's the year that the dollar went for silver, and that since then Americans have been robbed by inflation and graduated income tax, and which is part of the Communist Manifesto, and it's like all the communists are
fucking commies, man, fucking commies.
Yeah.
So you've been talking about these matters of liberty, actual currency, the U.S. Constitution, and largely the works of Bill Cooper on your channel for what, about 12 years?
17 years.
Holy shit, 17 years. Your channel's almost an adult, dude.
Well, I've been talking about it longer in real life. It's
sure, but that's quite an endeavor you've taken on as far as doing these I guess what would be best be described as an effort of education, because you're always showing what you're reading in the documents you're reading from, and how you go through a very educated approach from what I've seen when you don't have guests on to do other sort of discourse on there, or have your every other weekend guest, your Todd the magician there, who does a hell of a good Bob Dylan impression and loves to to sing some Bob Dylan songs every weekend there. But other than that, you're oftentimes going over some I appreciate Todd's perspective on a lot of things. In fact, I really enjoyed the Dragnet show we all did there, the Dragnet review here on Operation GCD.
Oh yeah, that definitely gave me a different perspective on, because I didn't know it was gonna go that way. I was like, whoa, this movie's based on real criminals. Like that's very interesting.
It gets weird. It gets weird fast on that one.
Well, now I wonder how many other movies are like that, like the Dan Aykroyd where he's the judge, where he's the Masonic judge.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude, we might have to do that one. I love that movie, and Hollywood would never let Aykroyd direct another film after that one because it was such dog shit. Objectively, the film's dog shit, but what was it? Nothing but trouble.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. The car in it, if you find those rims on that Mercedes, those rims are worth a fortune. The
Oh,
car in the
don't
movie.
get me wrong. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. It's great for a shitty comedy of the '90s, right? You know what I mean? But like as far as Hollywood was concerned, it was a flop, financially speaking, critically speaking.
Oh, yeah.
So Hollywood was like, Dan Aykroyd, you can never direct another film again. That was his directorial debut.
Yeah. Makes me wonder because he claims he's seen Men in Black and stuff, and
Right.
I don't know if he's.
I claim he's a little bit too close to Tuesday Weld for my taste, friend. But you know what I mean. She's deeply involved in this. Some folks describe it as the Illuminati kind of high priestess of Hollywood. Some folks kind of describe it as the upper echelons of this kind of process cult network in Hollywood. Whatever you want to look at it as. She seems to be in
Theosophist
deep.
by chance?
Well, I mean, she seems to have come from the same kind of very deep occulted background of many of these families. So, some of these families that started America, the Welds are a very prominent family of Massachusetts who not only were members of the Society of the Cincinnati of the Massachusetts chapter, the secret society that started America. Their home served as the kind of the headquarters during the wars of 1776 for the Massachusetts chapter, Weld Manor, and it sits on Weld Hill, which is really a mound, not a hill, just outside of Boston there. And their family started Harvard. So when you see Trump attacking Harvard today, and I argue there's a anti-liberty faction and a pro-liberty faction of the Society of the Cincinnati that has been there since the beginning and has erupted publicly through feuds such as the assassination of Alexander Hamilton by fellow society member Aaron Burr, because Hamilton was the president general at the time and Burr was trying to take over the country. We just, much like this Knights Templar tale, modern day historians don't put those two elements together, despite them being part of the exact same, activity.
Yeah.
So, we see Trump attacking Harvard and trying to pull all this funding. I mean, they do a bunch of.
Oh, we lost you for a minute. You there? 10-4. Check.
Back? We got a man down.
You're back.
I think it really is this pro-liberty, anti-liberty faction, and really the attack on Harvard is an attack on the Welds. And again, it goes real deep when you start looking at all these occultism of these families and groups. But it is this part of this idea of liberty, I think, that in this occultism of these families that really did start America, right? Though, you know what I mean? If we're talking about liberty and the idea of getting away from the crown, because a lot of the ideas we have of the Knights Templar today is we live under this Christopher Columbus 1492 history of America that I call the crown's version of events, right? The crown history, England, the Vatican crown, right?
Yeah, because he was a Rosicrucian, Columbus, and I think he was also one of the opposing knighthoods of the Templars, the one with the green cross. I can't remember. I think it's Hospitaller.
Well, he marries the head Templar's daughter in Spain, so there's a lot to be discussed there. But
yeah, that's where they say, that's where Cooper says that Columbus got the maps and that he was under the stepfather's orders to do the bidding, which is interesting. Wait, did you say that her father was a Templar?
Yeah. So not to get too far ahead in the chronology here, but when things go down and shit falls out for the Templars, they just take on a new name in many of these places. The Templars were not just in Scotland or England. They had Portugal, Spain, right, France. So
Newport.
the folks in there in Portugal and Spain, I think they all fell under a new order of like the Knights of Christ, maybe, or something like that.
You could always tell by their 8-sided buildings.
I'll look up their name in a minute, but anyhow, the head of that organization was the father-in-law to Christopher Columbus. So again, he married, whether or not he's from the same lineage, he at least marries into it. But nonetheless, we get the version of events of America Vespucci being the reason for America's name, when really that's the goddess worship of this organization and these families, and back to the organization being the Society of the Cincinnati. That's why we have District of Columbia, the Statue of, all this Statue of Liberty, Columbia University, Columbia Broadcasting, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So
Columbia was the goddess of ancient times.
What is it?
the goddess of ancient times, basically Sophia.
No, that's exactly what it is, because all they did was mash together, characteristics of older of all these other goddesses throughout time. So yeah, that's exactly what that is. So it is a goddess worship, though, that I think that is the at least the root. You can get weird in the occultism past that, but it is the root of the divide between these families and the crown, right? So it is these Templar families, and the Society of the Cincinnati is really just, you could just, much like I just said, the folks in Spain took on the Knights of Christ from the Knights Templar, right? Or again, I'll look up the actual name. That's really, that's the best way to look at the Society of the Cincinnati. It's the same families, descendants of Templars, and we'll talk about here tonight with how closely descended George Washington is from the Templars that signed Magna Carta. So he's descended from nearly half of the 25. So those are his forefathers. So and I'll show folks, and you claim folks the interweb some evidence of that claim, because it sounds kind of wild, right? But it is the same families 500 years apart doing the same things like that. But it is also, the best way to look at the Society of Cincinnati is it's just the Knights Templar under a new name.
Yeah, that's it's like they're the knighthood that started America, which is going against what seemed to be a Vatican controlled knighthood that was in Europe.
Yeah, and they literally are the knighthood that started America. So if you take their tour, the headquarters, it's, I recommend folks go to the Society of the Cincinnati headquarters there in DC and take the tour. It's an interesting tour. It's free. And they have a library there. It's also free to access. I recommend that as well. You go through there, you can kind of see that goddess worship too, Clint. You were just mentioning, through their tapestries, right? They have, Athena, Diana, all these, the hunter goddesses, the war goddesses, right? You see, some Finnegan hats. I always mispronounce that. Finnegan hats or Finnegan hats, the Liberty caps. That's a common trope in there as well.
Phrygian.
Phrygian, there we go. Phrygian.
Yeah, what was that? So it's like some of the secret societies, they like to attach certain belief systems to stuff, but then others, whereas like it's like it was all symbolism in an alchemical system, basically, where they were the knighthood consisted of becoming pure of heart, through the degrees, and the parts of the order where like the knights could never disrobe or anything. Like there was that they but it's interesting because in other parts of the countries of Europe, they had been grown to be such huge figures, or there was a saying to drink like a Templar. But
really?
Like, yeah. So it's like there's this like there was, I don't know if it was a split or if it was because one side was to be all priest-like, the other side kind of turned into wild people. I would assume the wild people that were drinking were the ones that were the ones that that created the Magna Carta, that were fucking.
Well, you're talking the same subject. I think they're playing. So it's funny. I didn't know that term, but it's funny you say that. So we see that in the story of Robin Hood. So that's a good lead into Robin Hood. So figured we go over some of the characters here in Robin Hood, how that tells the story of the Magna Carta, and then we'll discuss the Magna Carta and the Templar stuff. But when we're looking at Robin Hood, I mean, everyone's familiar with that tale, right? I mean, I've seen some comments in the chat already how this is some folks' favorite tale here, or some movie and whatnot. So obviously we're about the same age there, Clint. I think I got a year or two on you, I believe, since we've What are you 45, 50? I'm joking.
To be undetermined.
What are you, 72? Yes. What are you retired? You got Clint, you got an AARP card over there? What's going on here, bud?
Yeah.
Obviously, though, this was a big part of my childhood version. I saw the Disney cartoon version of Robin Hood first, I suppose, right? That was, I think, from the 60s or 50s. I saw the Errol Flynn version of Robin Hood after that, before I'd seen this one. But this one was probably my favorite version out of those three. And then I think Men in Tights came after that, which I certainly enjoying parodies. Yeah. But even in enjoying these, so you remember this one, though, right?
Too. Yeah, I've seen that one. I've seen it
Which
quite
one
a
was
few
the
times. I think I've
60s
seen it in
one?
the movie theaters. Wait, what's
Yeah, I
that?
saw this in the theaters. I saw the Men in Tights too.
Yeah, that one was pretty funny.
I
It's
think Errol
free to
Flynn was
watch.
from like 1939 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I seen that one. I remember when I was a kid, we rented the Men in Tights one, and my dad's like thinking it's gonna be
Yeah.
regular Robin Hood, and he got all pissed. He's like, "What the fuck?" Oh, you know, I didn't mean to swear. He's like, "What the hell is this?" You know.
Right. Now this is a good one. I mean, I'm a Sean Connery super, as a fellow Scotsman, I'm a Sean Connery super fan. So obviously I have to appreciate this one because Connery makes an appearance as King Richard the Lionheart, the Templar knight who's away with the King John, his younger brother, steals the kingdom, right? So, and that is the
Yeah.
tale we see here. We see Connery's character come in at the end of Prince of Thieves, and save the day, right? And again, that's him, it's a fictionalized version of allegedly what happened. Allegedly, Richard dies in the Crusades, but
Yeah.
in 1199. But nonetheless, that they are away on the Crusades, and that's why King John has the ability to usurp the kingdom, is because his brother, the king, is away.
Yeah.
But I don't like the title Prince of Thieves. Again, it's they didn't steal nothing, man. King John signed that land back over to he stole the Templars' land while they were gone in 1213, and then when they got back, they wanted their land back, and that's what ultimately leads to what our modern day crown historians call the robber baron wars, right? And the robber barons are just 25 Knights Templar who wanted their land back, and that's the character basis we see with Robin of Locksley, right? So I changed it from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, to Robin Hood, a Knights Templar tale, but this is my Muppetized version of Kevin Costner.
Waka waka. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still trying to get my family's land back from Scotland. Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
It was interesting.
The Nazis burnt down Clan Vance's Barnbark estate during the war. It sits over there in ruins today. That's where my Clan Vance goes back to, is the Vances of Barnbark, just across the border into Scotland. Lowlanders, not Highlanders. The Vances that are Clan Vans is in the Scottish spelling VANS. But yeah, the Nazis blew that motherfucker up, dude.
Yeah, I'm related to that.
It was a real barn burn. That's a good point. The Nazis made sure it was a real barn burn. They burned every piece of that property, dude. The estate sits for whatever reason, it still just sits in ruins today. I'm not sure why no one cleans that shit up.
Yeah, I was sneezing from the herbage. The usurpation of crowns through Europe was. It's like I like to start off with the original, because I do a lot of the study of the heraldry, and the original flag of the Knights Templar was just a black and white flag. It originally didn't have a cross, and it was later given the cross, and then it was merged, and then later it changed to a red cross because of the Swiss taking over the order in the late 13.
That's what they'd want you to believe. That's what they'd want you to believe, Clint. But please continue.
It's like, I guess to start off on the main story, I guess the Philip the Beautiful, they called him, the King of France, was him and the Pope. I don't remember the Pope's name, but they called him Fatuitous because he's a fat slob.
Are we talking 1307?
Yeah, just like a year or so before. It's like they had borrowed so much money from the Templars and they couldn't pay it back, and so they're like, how do we plus Philip le Bel got blackballed from the order because he wanted to join, but they're like, we don't want no aristocracy in our order, so they voted him out. And fucking,
may I put a pen in this right now, because I think you may have gotten into a DeLorean and traveled at 88 miles an hour, friend, because you're time traveling, dude. We're starting here in 1215. You're up to 1307.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm pretty buzzed.
No
so
worries.
back then, they would have had a black and white flag back then. That's what.
That's a good point you bring up, that because that is back to that crown history, right? So really, the Templars' whole composition, their organization, and their attire and their tactics, they all go back to the what is known as the Order of the Assassins, right? So there's a fellow by the name of Hugh de Paynes. He was kind of the Secretary of State for the Third Crusades for the Pope over there in Jerusalem, and he was one of the co-founders of the Knights Templar, and he's also of part Sufi Moorish ancestry, right?
Yeah.
So he's really the one who, I believe, as the co-founder and branches in his history, is the one who establishes this relationship with the Order of Assassins, right? The Hashish Assassins, right? And we see them in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, with Morgan Freeman, which I would allege may or may not be Jimi Hendrix, but that's a different story altogether.
Well, I always wondered if that's the thing where it's like Cooper asserts that the assassins had moved within the order of the Templars, and then there was also the other, and that there was. It's like Cooper asserts that the Alumbrados had moved through Jesuitism and then moved through Illuminati and then moved into Masonry in modern times, but like it's
that
like
I'm
these
unclear
orders,
about, but I can tell you in the year 1118, Hugh de Paynes, a man of Moorish Sufi ancestry, and he helped establish both of these orders, the Order of Assassins,
okay,
and
yeah,
and he bridged the gap between these things. These are extensions of the same organization, is what I'm saying. Right? They have the exact same composition, ranking system, uniforms, colors, everything. This is where they get the Red Cross from.
Interesting. I wonder if
and this is who we see save Robin of Locksley, right? That's what we see in Prince of Thieves, is this assassin saves Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman / Jimi Hendrix saves Kevin Costner, but they don't tell you this is a relationship that goes far deeper with these organizations, right? It does introduce. I'm using this as a reference point because it introduces the idea and the tale, right? Like we know who the assassins are because we know that we can see the character of Morgan Freeman there, but it's a lot deeper narrative. So allegedly, the whole, like I said, the whole organizational structure and like their whole composition of tactics and uniform and colors all come from the assassins.
What's interesting, in the pirate stuff, there was degrees in which pirates were basically Templars, but there was degrees where you would be tricked into thinking your hand is going to be cut off. And in the movie at the start, he almost gets his hand cut off. It's just like in Goonies where the hand gets smashed in the thing. It's like all the orders. That's a thing that goes back to the Middle East where they would cut your hand off, and that
they'll still do that. I've seen it.
Oh yeah.
I seen friend. Dude. I was in real world, dude. I was over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, dude. And was it Riyadh? I was over there on Prince Sultan Air Base. We were at I thought we went down to. I took a bus trip to a market. I'm pretty sure it was Riyadh or near Riyadh. Yeah, dude. They rushed us back on the bus, dude. They're like, "You guys gotta get back on the bus. They're about to go stone somebody." My bus driver's telling me, I'm like, "Oh shit, we gotta get back to base, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's a local dude, he's driving the bus for us and whatnot. And he's like, what do you mean stone me? Like, they're going to bring in a dump truck full of stones and they're just going to dump it on this dude. I'm like, what? Because he'd stolen from that market, I guess, twice. The first time I think they lopped something off, he said. And then the second time, they're like, we're just going to dump a bunch of rocks on this guy and call it a day.
It seems kind of harsh.
That's their way of life, I guess. So the assassins obviously didn't have the red cross, but they had a red symbol. I think it was some sort of crescent moon looking thing, like you see on this guy's attire here, right? But it was red on a white background, right? Which is the same uniform you see adopted by the Templars, except theirs is a cross, the cross Saint George, and red on the white background. But again, these organizations are identical, man. It's the same structure. And again, Hugh de Paynes is to thank for that, because again, I think there's an order. What I'm saying is we're told, this Templar order just kind of started, but what I'm saying is these families come from somewhere, right? And some of that Moorish invasion to areas of what is now Spain, Portugal, and France, right? This is Hugh de Paynes' ancestry, right? So he's of some of these families from that area, and it's the same families that are fighting against the Vatican for years that I think that set up these things, which is the same families today that we see here that start America. So, again, we're told a crown history, but there's a lot more to these stories, I think, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, because before the Templars' banishment, they would give peasants and stuff loans that were without interest, and that the banks of modern times and stuff give loans with interest, and so there's discrepancies in the stories, and because it's like they were originally trying to save people from getting robbed, simply, who were going through the desert to visit on the pilgrimage to Israel. They each had a tattoo on their wrist that was a equilateral cross with a palm leaf and what was that other thing? The 4 dots on each side of the cross, which are the symbols of the 4 cardinal points of the sky. It's just a tattoo for safe passage, basically.
No, and there's certainly some elements of those narratives that are true, Clint, but a lot of that is the official crown history of the Templars. So the Templars' first crusade, the story of Robin Hood revolves around the Third Crusade. The stories of the First Crusade, though, the stories of the First Crusade, though, have nothing to do with Jerusalem, and it's a common misconception of history and understanding of this organization.
Was the Third Crusade, was that the King Louis of Jerusalem, or was that because I know that the arch in St. Louis is named after the first king of Jerusalem. I just can't remember his.
I thought it was named after King. I thought it was named after King Louis.
The arch in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Oh no. Well, according to the
Masons, Louisville.
Yeah,
like Marietta, like his wife, Marie Antoinette. These were the folks that sanctioned. These were the folks that sanctioned the Society of Cincinnati. This is why these things are named that way. I think. I don't know of any connections to Jerusalem. My understanding is, when King Louis and Marie Antoinette sanctioned the Society of Cincinnati in October of 1784, circa. This is because this was the tight connections they had with the society, and some of their cousins who were members of the society, such as Marquis de Lafayette, the head of the French chapter. But you'll see that in Marietta, Ohio. That's a General Arthur St. Clair, speaking of Templar families, of the St. Clair heritage of Scotland. He's the one who helped establish that city. He was the governor of the Northwest Territories.
Interesting.
And the last executive. He was the last executive in the Continental Congress before Washington became president. So he's a major figure.
Yeah, it's interesting. There does seem to be a merger of societies to start America in a way. It's complicated. I still have a paradigm with the Prince of Prussia chartering the Scottish Rite Lodge in DC. I'm not sure if it was.
You do realize that the royalties of Sweden and Prussia are members of the Society of Cincinnati. I believe the King of Sweden right now is a member.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because one of the generals in the Revolutionary War was a Prussian general.
Dude, we got Prussians, we got Polish, we got what else are we missing here? I'm missing another one there. Polish. We got Bavarians. We got Bavarian people. Polish. There's another one I'm missing there. Kazimierz Pulaski was part Polish, part Czech, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. General von Steuben, I believe, was was he Bavarian? He was of some German heritage.
Yeah.
Anyhow. So that's what I'm saying is we have this ongoing situations with this fight between, long-standing histories throughout Europe, right? When you're including members of European royalty that are still members of the same secret society that started America, the same secret society behind the French Revolution, we're talking about a much longer-standing history of an argument here, and that's what we're talking about here with the Templars. But as far as the First Crusades go, it had nothing to do with Jerusalem. They went to modern-day Turkey, the border of Turkey and Syria, the areas of Sanlurfa, Turkey, near Sanlurfa there, near the border, right? And it's like the areas where ISIS a number of years back, was just blowing shit up. Same region. So that, according to the Templar, and was the kingdom of their Jesus and Mary that they descend from in this tale of the holy bloodline, the Holy Grail, right? That's of that same kind of narrative. This is what I suspect was the Templars' belief, and that's why they went there, because that was the kingdom of Edessa, and that's where they claim their heritage from. Apparently,
that's interesting.
They spent 30.
I've heard multiple Grail lores of the One's about a labyrinth on a hilltop in England with a symbol of a labyrinth on the side of the seashore, which is identical.
We got a man down.
Yeah, which is identical to the symbol of a Native American labyrinth symbol from Arizona. There's another grail lore of the three knights and the Fisher King and the Fisher King preserved, and technically, and this the one I'm bringing up because there's multiple versions of it, but the Fisher King is technically Jesus, according to the story, and the
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean Cooper brings it 2 or 3 different ways where some of the occult, some of the books believe that the parts of the order were practicing castration, other parts were simply symbolism of cleanliness, such as similar to the Masonic apron of the sheepskin, which is a symbol of, like cleanliness, basically, like the where it's.
I'm sure there's some shared symbolism there for sure, and again, this is what I mean, Clint, by when you want to start talking about what is liberty and who defines liberty amongst somebody else's liberty, and whether or not you want to let them lop their dick off to make it look like some sheepskin rug. Look, dude, not my style, but you know what I mean.
Those are 2 different.
Well, look, if they're into that thing, look, dude, I'm not one to judge.
Yeah,
but the as far as the tale we see here in back to the Magna Carta, so we got King John of Lackland, right? This is the guy that the 25 quote unquote robber barons, aka the Templar Knights who had their land stolen, steal, as modern history says, they steal their land back from King John by holding him hostage and having him sign the Magna Carta, which is essentially the Bill of Rights. It's a contract establishing land and liberty, with rights issued by God, right? Not a king.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah.
And land and liberty they already had issued from the Pope, and the king gave back to the Pope while they were away at the crusades. So again, part of the saga we see with Robin of Locksley returning.
Yep. One example of the Magna Carta is it's got a specific clause that states that an officer of government cannot be the sole witness of a crime, to keep officers from government from, putting false charges against people as the sole witness.
For sure, which is why we see that written in our Constitution about public rights to justice and in proceedings, right?
Yeah,
and which is why I'm things like the Idaho 4 murder case that I often cover here on Operation GCD and over at Kane B's The Purge YouTube channel. This is one of the things I'm so incensed about, is because that entire case has been sealed under some elements of tomfoolery and shenanigans, and not the good kind of shenanigans, but these are the rights that are the fundamental rights of our country. These things are not secret proceedings, and secret proceedings that even back in 1215 the Templar Knights were aware of, like as you're pointing out, is not conducive to an actual liberty and an actual free and open society.
Yeah, I speculate that there's something that's
this is we meet this character in Robin Hood, Sheriff of Nottingham. He's not Brian's uncle there, Lucy Morningstar, Princess of Darkness, but I appreciate the commentary. He does need to be a Muppet, though. I need to make this guy a Muppet for sure. He's already Muppet-like. Now, this is Alan Rickman, dude. Rickman killed it in this role, but this is kind of a fictional role as far as history goes.
Yeah, the Sheriff of Nottingham.
What do you think was better, Rickman and Die Hard, or Rickman and Robin Hood, or Rickman and Die Hard? Because they were like back-to-back years. Rickman was killing it in the early 90s, dude.
I definitely really liked this movie. It was classic instantly. You
didn't like Rickman and Die Hard, or Rickman in this one?
I mean, they were both pretty good. It's a tough decision.
I'd say he's a better villain in Die Hard. He's a pretty good villain in this one, though.
Yeah, the movie it's interesting how they put that little witchcraft spin on it. Where he's got that, they make fun of it.
I think it is, dude. I think it speaks to the occultism in these matters as well, because again, that is again what some of the root is between. It's not just the goddess worship, but it is the associated occultism that goes with these families and whatnot. And again, King John's related to most of the Templar Knights that hold him captive. They're all cousins. Most of them are all cousins to him. You know what I mean? So these are family feuds as well. And again, family feud. He stole the kingdom from his brother. So when his brother was away, so we're talking family feud stuff. You know.
Yeah, some speculate there was orders that practiced the concealed worship of Satan, the devil.
Again, dude, it's they want to lop their dicks off, look like some sheepskin rugs, dude. I'm not one here to judge right now. At least you know what I mean. What I'm saying is, it's a sliding scale when you start talking about what is one man's liberty, right? You know what I mean? I'm not condoning these activities, but
well, it's like there's so many different branches of Templars, where it's like it's very similar to Freemasonry, where it was Freemasonry seemed to have been kind of captured by Illuminism of the Weishaupt's order, and that the before it was in its original form, Templarism would have been a Christian / Jesus concealed worship of some sort, B protecting people, and C basically knight priests. And so they started off as something good for the people, and then orders seem to have it's like this. There's this thing with Crowley where he was making fake orders, like he made a fake Rosicrucian order, and like there seems to have been an Illuminist on the dark side thing where they were making duplicate orders of other orders, and it's very. I found this the case when I was researching Leadbeater. I was reading one of Leadbeater's books. I thought I had some juicy dirt.
I love his first one, Yellow.
Well, I thought I thought I had some juicy dirt on Crowley, and the whole book was Leadbeater.
Yellow Leadbetter.
Climber Leadbeater.
The Yellow Leadbetter, Pearl Jam.
No.
It's a great song.
Oh yeah, but so this writer was he was saying he said he had took Crowley to court for starting a fake Rosicrucian order and so on and so forth. And I think that the Vatican did something similar, where after they in 1013 on Friday the 13th, after they got rid of the order, then they brought back other orders, and then eventually basically the Knights of Malta tried to pretend like it was the Templars, basically.
Yeah, but this is all, again, Clint, we keep defaulting back to false narratives perpetrated by the crown. So the Templars operated in a completely different capacity from what's been described. So when what you're saying as far as they had different orders, that's true. They had different families and different groups, if you will, different clans almost in the Scottish version specifically.
Well, no, I mean, like, there was literally people trying to like clone the order for nostalgia to convince initiates to basically they were turning the secret societies at one point into like an enterprise where they were trying to make money off it. That's where
I have no doubt they got bastardized when co-opted like anything else does. But what I'm saying, as the actual Templar Knight order operated, they operated in these groups. So you'd have a Templar Knight, then you'd have basically they would have oftentimes, like you see in Robin of Locksley, right? So you see Locksley Castle there. You have a compound there with a walled-in area, and you have folks that work there and folks that do different things. Like you have a blacksmith, et cetera. You have support staff, if you will. So this is how they operated. Then they have folks that make the food there and grow the food there. So these are all. It was roughly around 25 to 30 people per Templar Knight. So they would have their own operations and essentially fiefdoms, if you will. But I mean, again, that term can be used or construed in numerous capacities. I'm not using it in nefarious capacity necessarily, but it's essentially what it was. But nonetheless, these are the kind of different. This is what established the different orders as you're describing, right?
Yeah,
it's really just these different groups.
Yeah, the first Templars, there was only 2 degrees, Squire and Knight, and there was all the divisions of degrees. That's something that came, from.
I don't know if that's accurate. Again, we'll have to do an analysis maybe on the Hashish assassins there and the composition of their organizations versus the Templars, because again, it's identical, and they have.
Yeah, that's when it went up to 7 degrees. The merger, I believe.
I'm not even talking about the esoteric versions. I'm just talking about their composition and their structure, their organizational structure.
Yeah. Well, they did seem to have absolute following. The leader, his his word was absolute command.
It's a military order, Clint.
Yeah, it's you know,
I'm sure
if they
you
were
can't
told
take
to
orders
jump,
from your officer or enlisted in charge of you. You're going to have, you know, in the military, it's, you know, it's the way it goes, man.
yeah, there was severe penalty for disobeying an order.
So back here to the Robin Hood tale, if we will, the Sheriff of Nottingham is a fictional character in a sense of the Nottingham district there doesn't become established until I think 200 years after this tale of Robin Hood. So, but I think the reason they use that is because it goes back to this long-standing family feuds of these, you know, that continue on through today. And Nottingham was actually a Norman settlement. So this is the predecessors, this is the ancestors to the Templar, right? The Normans, right? For example, I'll use Clan Vance as an example through my ancestry there. So you have Knights Templar, Clan Vance. In fact, there's a member of the English branch. I'm not my branch, the other branch. I'll get to that in a second because you have two branches that come from the Normans. One that goes to Scotland, one that goes to England. Two brothers. They were William the Conqueror's lieutenants and cousins. They were born in the same castle in Normandy as William the Conqueror, but this is the same. This is what I'm getting at. This Nottingham castle is of those Norman ancestry, right? So I think that's why they incorporate that into the tale as a nod to this whole situation and power of control of this region that is known as Nottingham Castle later, right? But it is of this same Norman. See right here, it says built on this site of a Norman castle built in 1068. The Normans invaded the UK in 1066. This was a site that William the Conqueror sanctioned himself. So you go fast forward, you have the Clan Vance Knights of the Norman invasion there. William the Conqueror's lieutenants, one sets up shop in England, the other one there in what would later become Scotland. And what I was saying before, the Vances of Barnbark that the Nazis, you know, blew out. The English branch, there was a knight that was kidnapped by King John of Lackland, one of the Vance Templar knights there in the English branch, that seemed to have started off this feud in 1213 as well, or at least was the tipping point, I guess is the better way to put it, of the feud, right? So in 1213, while Robin Hood and and King Richard are away on the Third Crusade, King John gives the land back to the Vatican, right? But at the same time, he holds a Templar Knight of Clan Vance, the English branch there, kidnaps him. So we see that story kind of play out there in Robin Hood too, right? They get kidnapped, right, by King John. So I'm just saying there's a lot of history to this tale, and it all surrounds these Templar families. Again, it goes back to Norman stuff, and we see the Nottingham nod to this story because of the Norman connections to it.
Excuse me. His heraldry is the 3 lines with the
Harold. Who's Harold?
Raised paws. Damn it! Excuse me. His heraldry is the 3 lions, the raised paws, and the red flag. And it's like the certain orders, they can always be, I believe that they can be told by the colors of their guilds and the symbology, and that it's like, excuse me, the knighthoods of the knighthoods trying to retain. It's like when they went to there on one of the crusades, they had found some kind of treasure in Solomon's stables, and that I mean this kind of relates to, you're familiar with that Lorenz Chateau or whatever, in France. There's a
sure.
Yeah, there was a priest that was said to have found a scroll in the leg of a church or something, and that he had sent it to the Rome, and then all of a sudden the priest is getting mad paid, and he's like, he builds this castle with the main the entrance with the demon Azazel or whatever, or no, that's not the right demon.
I think it was Schindler's List, actually.
Yeah. So
Schindler's List.
Some say that the Templars found knowledge of banking, and some say they found the golden seven candelabra. So there's many different rumors and speculation of what they found, but that they found something, in that they had found a secret that was unknown to the rest of the world about the religion, and that they took it with them, and they kept it because they knew if it got out it would destroy religion, you know what I mean? And like, so they'd kept it secret because people weren't ready for the it's very interesting. That's for the Baphomet lore. It was never a black Baphomet. Eliphas Levi had perverted the symbol, and the symbol was just a three-faced thing, and that it was I mean, that's kind of where it goes to the if the Masonic lore. Well, if the Masonic lore is correct, basically the three-faced symbol was. I can wrap it up really quick. The three-faced symbol was simply a symbol of Solomon and the two hirems that made the molten sea, which is mankind, and it was all just symbolism of, But go on, sorry.
No, I mean I kept cutting out, so I don't. You were talking about the bloodlines, but then I think you ended at the Leo Taxel hoax. I don't know where we were in between, but yeah. I'll give you a response on both because I cut out there in between. So yeah, well, I mean, the Renslaw des Chateaux is all about the bloodlines I was describing earlier. I think there's a lot to these things. Again, we're looking at these bloodlines now from 1776 to 1215 to 1066. It's the same fucking people. Yeah. And I agree with you. The Leo Taxel hoax, much like a lot of the Knights Templar stuff in modern day conspiracy culture, is fucking pure nonsense. But again, we live underneath the crown history, so I don't really pay much attention to the crown history, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, the Catholic Church made up a lie about the Brotherhood of the Knights Templar, where
make up a lot of lies, dude.
Oh yeah. Well, so before you were a member, consider this tarot card 0, the Fool. You would symbolically spit on a crucifix. You'd spit on Jesus because you were the profane before you entered. And so, and then that was the 0 degree of Templarism in the traditional sense. And that the first degree would have been to be clean forever, basically it was all about, what do they call that when people don't drink or sleep around and stuff? What priests do, basically.
Schindler's List. Yeah. Schindler's List, I think, is the correct answer for 200. So if I may back here to the Templar stuff, though, Clint. So we were saying 1213, the Templar advance Norman ancestry again with the Nottingham stuff. They gets kidnapped by John of Lackland, right? King John of Lackland. Again, a cousin to many of these Templar robber baron knights that would hold him hostage to sign the Magna Carta, because he gives away, we'll get back to in a second, more of the Knights Templar stuff to, he was really pissing on the Templar when he gave the land back to the Vatican. I'll get back to that in a minute, but it is Richard the Lionheart, the actual King of England, again, who's at the Crusades, that gives John the opportunity to usurp power in the kingdom. And again, we see a fine Scottish man here, Sean Connery, acting here as King Richard in the Prince of Thieves version, right? So, when you said the drunk stuff earlier, though, what do you got? What you at?
Well, it's interesting that he's wearing that clothes,
the costumes.
Yeah, because
isn't this the I think this is the actual I think this is the actual coat of arms of King Richard, if I'm not mistaken. He was the Lionheart, so.
Well, because the lion's paw was the symbol of the. Damn it, I keep sneezing.
Are you we got a man down. We have a man down.
I keep sneezing. The lion's paw is the symbol of the Knights Templar initiation to reborn, like Jesus rebirth Lazarus.
Well, there you go. Maybe that's King Richard was a very prominent Templar. Maybe he's one of the people that started that, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's what they found there, possibly. Or I don't know if the lion's paw existed before then. I would assume the original initiation date was August 8th because that's the Lion's Gate in astronomy. But it's like their order was hijacked and later in time, but in this time it was something that was, there were so many people that were it's like these people at this time, these Templars were the most scientific. Like they were doing archaeological surveys of Solomon's temple before anybody had ever really done organized archaeology, and that so the dismissal of all the lore is very it's problematic with stuff, because people think because something is a lord, that doesn't mean that it's not legitimate in history. Damn it, I gotta sneeze again.
Am I back?
Okay, that was perfect
Am I
timing.
back?
Yeah,
well, dude, that's exactly what they were doing here in America, dude. The Society of Cincinnati, they started digging into mounds. So again, we're talking about the same shit, man. Now, but I would imagine some of the stuff you're describing is stuff that was probably coming from Richard the Lionheart. Again, he was a prominent Templar. So, back to you were saying earlier though, the drunken Templar reference. Well, the folks who started the Templar were the Cistercian monks. So along with Hugh de Paynes, you have damn it, I just forgot his name. Son of a bitch.
damn it.
Bernard de Clairvaux. You have Bernard de Clairvaux, who was a Cistercian monk. He actually officially founds the Templar order in the Council of Clermont in Clermont, France. A lot to do with the connections to Clermont County, Ohio, because the future king of France was teaching under an assumed identity in the Society of Cincinnati town in Clermont County, Ohio. So there's a lot of these connections that go on. But nonetheless, Clermont, France is the origins of the Templar via Bernard de Clairvaux and Hugh de Paynes, who was the kind of the Secretary of State there in Jerusalem. But it is the Cistercian monks who are the drunken monks, as seen in the Prince of Thieves version. We get, well, many of the versions, but this is the Prince of Thieves version. We get Friar Tuck, the drunken Cistercian monk, right?
Yeah, I did want to add back to that picture real quick. The symbol on the guild was the fleur de lis, which is a Templar symbol. Which is the
on here.
Yeah, on the heraldry there on that shield.
Yeah,
that's the fleur de lis, and it's what's that? Mater. That's Mother Nostra Cistercium.
That's a good. I'm glad you pointed that out. So back to your bloodline stuff and back to your Freemasonry business. So do you know that the man who introduced Scottish Rite Freemasonry to France, I think it was circa 1720, a fellow by the name of, let's call him Andrew Ramsay. Ramsay. He changed it Ramsey to Remsay when he Frenched it up.
Yeah.
He introduces. May I finish real quick? He introduces Freemasonry to France, and he's allegedly a member of the Priory of Sion. So the Priory of Sion uses that fleur de lis, I think, as an ode back to this same connection, because they're the protectors of the bloodlines of Jesus and Mary, as depicted in the Da Vinci Code, as you were talking about with the Renslaw des Chateaux. So that's a good point you make, because I think that's my opinion. That's where that comes from. And again, that's this connection between Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the Priory of Sion, and the Templar business, and these bloodlines. I think is it's an undiscovered, discussed in fiction mainly within the Da Vinci Code stuff, and one nonfiction book, I believe, in large part. But there's a lot more to be discovered there, I think. And I don't like a lot of the current treatments that have been made to it. Again, I think a lot of the more recent stuff that we see in alternative media or conspiracy culture bastardizes these things and misdescribes them intentionally. But
yeah, well, it's like the occultist societies believe that the symbols of Mary and Martha were the two mothers of alchemy, and that the story was a story of how the universe was made, but also of all this other. It's like whatever they had founded, they had become cast-eyes from the world. It's like they're because the amount of planning that was done to get rid of the Templars. It's like they had sent letters to all the places in Europe that said, "Do not open under penalty of death. Do not open this letter until Friday the 13th." And then on that day, all the Templars were caged up and slaughtered and forced and tortured to have false confession. And then Jacques Desmoulins himself was said to have cursed the Pope or something, and part of the Masonic degrees is about the revenge of Jacques de Molay and how the Pope and the King of France and how they would pay basically. And some speculate that the French Revolution was by the Templars, but some also it's a long story. But
I mean, it's pretty well documented, Clint. Again, if you want to call the Society of Cincinnati the Templars, which I do, it's pretty well documented. And the French Revolution was as a result of the Society of Cincinnati. Now, the things that transpired after that's a different story altogether, but it's well documented. And again, I think we're talking 1307 and 1770, 80s. I think where we're really going at for here is back to 1215.
Yeah. I think some of the Templar order was descendants of the crown of Marcia, which was a pre-English culture, and which bared the double-headed eagle, and that the order had remained in power in secret. What's that?
What culture is this? What culture is this?
It was a kingdom called Mercia. It was pre. I think it was ended like 700 or so, but then it's like the what was it? I can't remember the name of the kings and stuff. But then when the Saxons
did the Vatican hate them?
Yeah, I'm sure they did, because they were not practicing the religion of Rome.
So the best way to look at it, Clint, is all the Templar families are comprised of all the cultures and families and royalty families of all the cultures that were put down by the Vatican.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Vatican,
and oftentimes they're family. Again, King John is family with, I think it's 12 of the 25 Templar that held him hostage to sign the Magna Carta. Right, so we're talking. These are family feuds, and I know family feuds, Clint. I'm a Hatfield McCoy,
yeah.
So I sit at the epicenter of that family feud. Families can be rough. This is a legendary feud. You're not familiar with the Hatfields and McCoys?
I think I'm just pretty stoned.
It spawned a miniseries on TNT starring Kevin Costner, the man who also stars in Robin Hood. And speaking of Robin Hood, we go back to these Cistercian monks. Now, these are the drunken monks, and they still are relevant today, in fact. So regarding, if I can take us on a quick detour back to modern era to make that point of how I'm going to bring a close here, folks, of the interwebs throughout the rest of the show, is how is this relevant still today? And here's a good note on that, because you see the Cistercian monks who start the Templar Knights, they then go to, in relative to this America stuff, we see them out in places like just north of Chico, California, in a place called the Abbey of New Clairvaux, named after Bernard Clairvaux. And you can see this this structure right here, this monastery, this Knights Templar monastery was moved, this worship house was moved. It's from 1215. I'm sorry, it was from 1250. It used to sit in Spain. This was a Templar place of worship in Spain. They moved to just north of Chico, California, one of the founding sites of California, where the Cistercian monks of this order brew beer with the local Sierra Nevada brewery.
Interesting. Yeah, they're in the business of moving castles and temples. I've noticed other castles that have been moved as well.
Well, isn't that interesting? They would move a Knights Templar site to one of the founding sites of California that's founded by families of the same heritage with the Knights Templar and the Society of Cincinnati, right?
Yeah. I think there's it's like these modern knights, I think they have to live in their order is concealed, and it's like the New World Order is their religion is taking over the world and taking freedom from all mankind, and definitely.
Well, speaking of taking freedom from mankind, have you heard of Monk's Mound? So the Cistercian monks, circa the early 1600s, a group of them, not the same monks that are there in California today, obviously, but it's the same lineage. So if you follow the lineage of these monks down to those guys in California today, they're of the same lineage of monks through the same chain of monkhood. and of the Cistercian order. So these folks here, as they're migrating across America back in the early 1600s, these French quote unquote Trappist monks of the Cistercian order set up shop for a couple decades on a mound in Cahokia, Illinois, called Monk's Mound, which is why it's called Monk's Mound, because they live there. So we can see this ongoing continuation of these same groups of folks with the same activities throughout time. We just ignore them because we live under a crown history, not crayon, but crown.
Yeah, the the Masons like to dig up the monks as well.
So, well, that's, again, we're talking most of the early Masonry is all started by these same people, right? So, I mean, again, a lot of mound stuff with the society, though, because it's one of their main things. But so back to 1213, this is the edict that King John signs while the Templar are away, right? And like I said, Robin Hood comes back and his land's gone because King John signed it over to the Pope in 1213, right? Magna Carta is 1215, but it's interesting because, like I said, King John was really taking a piss on the Templars, so he signs that edict in the Knights Templar church there in Dover, England there. So, he's really taking a piss on the Templars by signing all their land over in their own property, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they showed it in the movies where his land was stolen. And so I like the comedy version where it's literally being towed away. The castle gone.
Right. Well, we're sold this idea as the first Barons' War under the Crown history, but it's really the Templar and their Magna Carta getting their land back, right? So,
yeah.
Give me 1 second here. Got a red light filter on my computer that just kicked in, and I'm like, wait a second, I got blue light filters, I got red light filters. What's going on in life? My blue blockers and my red stuff here. I had a combination of filters that wasn't doing well for me, Clint.
Oh yeah.
So we see the Magna Carta, right? Again, it's 25 knights, right? They are these quote unquote robber barons, right? And then they establish what is basically our Bill of Rights. Is that your understanding? Because that's, this is essentially what modern day historians will call the predecessor to the Bill of Rights, correct? The Great Charter.
Yeah, it's part of the common law stuff. It's definitely detrimental for history of trying to have rights and freedom, and people are so brainwashed into hating the Constitution, they don't even know what it is, and they don't understand it's a contract, just like this charter, and then the contracts where it's like Rome and the Vatican and stuff have contracted the whole world away like fucking long ago, and that the art of contract is, it's technically the right to contract. It's a right, and that we've lost that right, and that that's why this type of stuff is very important.
Well, you're right, folks. We do have a very skewed sense of the Constitution in America today because we live under Crown history and Crown fucking propaganda. So, I mean, I don't know how anyone can expect anything less than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely detrimental that, because some say that the flag was made after the Viking sails. The stars were from the tribe of what was that tribe? But the Vikings were, a quasi precursor order that went into the Templars, and
well, that's like, the Vikings become Christianized in Normandy and with the Norse, and that's again William the Conqueror. That's his cousins Vance. You know what I mean? That's the Norman invasion of not only the UK in 1066, they invaded America in 1066, and the Lawn Saw Meadows settlement, which is an identified settlement established in circa 1066 by these same people. So again, this idea that these families were not in America, is a concept I was going to get into in a minute, Clint, but I'm glad you brought us here. Because we see Templar land claims in America, like the Kensington Runestone, buried in Alexandria, Minnesota in 1362. We know it's 1362 because it's dated numerous times on this land claim, this runestone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the stone is.
Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I've seen other similar stones as well, as along with unexplained stone walls that stretched for miles on the East Coast, that
Well,
were
there's a lot of evidence of that, right? We got the Newport, Rhode Island Tower and stuff like that. But this Kensington Runestone again is a land claim. That, again, how is this relevant today? 1362 stuff. Well, America gets this land claim again, Templar land claim, from a Society of Cincinnati member through a secret deal with some Society of Cincinnati or some Templar folks of the Spanish variety. You know, the Society of Cincinnati member being Napoleon, who then does a secret land deal to then sell it to Jefferson via assistance by a member of British Parliament who happens to be a Society of Cincinnati member. So there's a lot of, that's what I'm saying. When you look at an organization, you can't just say it's the Pope or the Vatican or whatever. You have a member of British Parliament who's a member of the Society of Cincinnati who is assisting in secret land deals in which to get America the land that was claimed via this Kensington Runestone back in 1362. And that land claim was the Louisiana Purchase. But it is that land claim right there that gets America the Louisiana Purchase, right?
Yeah.
So it's buried here at near the top, right here. And the idea of medieval land claims was to bury a stone like that in any waterway that touched the waterway which you buried that stone was in which that's the land you claimed. So all that land you see right there was claimed via a Templar land claim in 1362 and you know, orchestrated in America's sake via the Society of Cincinnati and Templar families.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do think there would have had to been a coordinated effort to start America fully. I mean, it's hard to say.
Again, it's not starting anything. If you're here in 1066, what are you starting?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like,
you're just getting your land back. You're just getting your land back, Clint. It's the same thing we're talking about with Robin Hood. They're not stealing. Yeah. There's no Prince of Thieves. They're just getting their land back, right?
Yeah, I see.
They're just getting their land back, right?
Oh,
there's no starting. I mean, if you want to talk about starting stuff, we got to go back. We're talking about 1215 right now, so we got to go back to 1066. So we're talking about starting stuff. You talking about practice?
Yeah, excuse me. I had to sneeze. It's definitely it is interesting. It's like they basically I mean, there's a term called Indian giving where it's
whoa,
like England.
Whoa. Did you learn that from Elizabeth Warren, dude? What's up? Did you read that in the back of her powwow cookbook?
Well, no, I'm not talking about from the Indians. I'm talking about the English or the countries were stealing from the Templars and so on and so forth, and that then they had you know what I mean, like the the Templars were it's like they had claimed the land and the land was stolen from them, and then they had to conquer it back. It's like, well, I mean,
that's what we're talking about there, right? It's what all these things are. That's what the fight for America was, right? So what the fight before America was, they want to keep getting their land back, but you know, there's an ongoing fight in which to accomplish these goals because you know the Vatican and the Crown want to be dicks.
Oh yeah.
So speaking, I know you like Freemasonry. So the site of this Kensington Runestone, while we're on the topic, in 1926, a bunch of Freemasons got together and tried to literally erect an obelisk on top of the site. Now the site is actually a mound, right? On the inscription of that stone, it says "on this rising land," because they buried that motherfucker in a mound. Again, back to this old veneration of whatever is going on with these mounds with these families, right? So they buried that thing in a mound. It says so on the stone, and you can see it at the park. And they try to put an obelisk on top of it. What's that about? Mounds and obelisks, Clint. It's an ongoing trend with these goddess worshiping families for whatever it is.
Druidism. It's there's mounds in Scotland, and they're
same people.
Yeah, it's there was like 7 or 8 of them, no, 13 of them, I think, in Wisconsin found in a mound. Tall, red hair. You know there was it's like Druidism has been and there was multiple kinds of Druidism. One was mixed with India stuff, but it wasn't that type of Druidism. But they were
India stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't the India stuff. Druidism. It was because there's some of the theologists or whatever connected with that, but there's precursor orders that were not connected with modern terminologies and so on and so forth, and it's like because some of the stuff, this fight over the land had started so long ago, you know, like, and they say that King David was a Druid, and that he was from another land, and that the fight over this land is very strange. It's according to the Hebrews, the land in Israel is some kind of portal to the dead or some shit. You know, I would assume the Templars.
This land is your
this treasure.
Land.
This year's. Well, like
this land.
Something is there that somebody is. They don't know why they want it, but I guarantee there's something there that fucking has been overlooked or some kind of what
Get him out of here. Get him out of here.
Well, I think that's why the dispute continues
here?
to this day over the land. Whose house is this?
Well, I think it's ongoing power. It's religious. It's power. It's money. You know what I mean? It's a lot of factors I think that weigh into it. But ultimately speaking, I think we're talking about a family feud here.
Yeah, definitely. The richest people on earth are all related because I mean they've inbred so much, and well, not necessarily that, but also the orders that have handed down through history, which is.
Well, I mean, you know, it's probably that too. They're pretty inbred.
Yeah,
I think it's a fairly accurate statement.
Well, it's interesting because it makes you wonder about the secret history of America. Like Ralph Epperson's always talking about the how many forts could they have had? Like all the Micmac Indians, natives or whatever, they have all Templar symbology. They have the bird and the star and the other stuff. It's like I think the Templars were part of a huge trading route.
Yep, a lot of Sinclair stuff. Yep.
Yeah, just a massive trading.
Well, they lived
route.
here. They intermingled with these families of the Micmacs.
What is this location on the? What is this image on the screen?
They intermingled with these families, right?
Yeah. Oh,
that's why we see the influence in their language, their flags, and their culture with the Micmac.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
What is going on
right
right
now? On the screen? Oh, sorry.
What happened?
Okay.
I don't see a mound. Is this a Rorschach test? What do you see on the screen? I see a First Baron's War. What are you seeing?
I seen some kind of like green grass and like a house that had like all sorts of windows on it.
Yeah.
Some kind of fancy house.
Is it a mound?
It looked like it might have been on a mound.
Yeah, that's the Kensington Runestone site. I don't know. I knew I had it here somewhere.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to switch tabs.
I'm stoned.
This didn't used to be there when I visited the site in the past, but this is the new fancy visitor center at that Kensington Runestone Discovery site. The Runestone sits in town. This is just outside of town, but we're seeing. I mean, it looks fancy. They didn't have no restrooms when I went there, man.
Oh,
but yeah. They for whatever reason they never built the obelisk there, but you know the Freemasons up there, but
yeah.
To the point though, the Magna Carta, like I said, even U.S. Constitution. If you just Google it, look right here, Google it. Magna Carta, U.S. Constitution. The Magna Carta significantly influenced the development of the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights. I mean, this is no secret. Again, modern day historians recognize this, calling it essentially the Magna Carta 2.0. But again, what's not recognized, again, which much like it's what's not recognized in the Robin Hood tale, right? When they're calling it Prince of Thieves, not like Robin Hood getting my shit back instead, right? Instead of Prince of Thieves, you know, stealing my shit back from you motherfuckers. But it's the same difference, right? You know, we're being told limited aspects of this stuff under Crown history, right? Kensington Runestone's a big hoax. I mean, there's a lot of information about that, but I would say that that's incorrect based upon a number of factors. Most notably, I think Scott Walter's done a significant study on it, but it's not even just his study, because the first geologist for the state of Minnesota, I believe his name was Newton Winchell, he happened to reach a very the same conclusions as Walter through similar, not the same methodologies, but similar methodologies. as far as aging the date of the rock based upon the roots and stuff that had embedded into it in the amount of time, and the weathering and the rock's surfaces of different grooves, and not just the inscription, but again the grooves caused by the roots and stuff like that as well. But I think the folks that want to tell you it's a hoax are the same folks that want to tell you Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. And those are the same folks that don't give a shit about American liberties and hate the U.S. Constitution. I'm not going to call them all communists, because there's a lot of communists that hate the Constitution, but I don't think you have to exclusively be a communist to hate the Constitution. But you do hate America if you hate the Constitution, or the Magna Carta for that matter. And again, when we're talking about we're talking about 1215. Like I said, these same families were already here in 1066, right? So 1215, they're reestablishing stuff over there. We're trying to reestablish contract stuff over here now. But again, this is an ongoing feud that has continued throughout the time before the establishment of America officially, but with the same folks, right?
Yeah, it's they're just trying to get all their economic slaves back. I mean, they basically do with the graduated income tax and all the unconstitutional stuff. I mean,
it's for those not familiar with Lonsdale Meadows, it's a Norse settlement, which it's should be accurately described as a Norman settlement, dating approximately 1,000 years ago. Excavated first in the 1960s. The site is located on the northernmost tip of Newfoundland. But that whole area, this settlement that has now been discovered, this civilization or culture that Lonsdale Meadows was a part of, stretched from Newfoundland down to what we call Nova Scotia, which is New Scotland, right? Back to this is the same regions you were describing, the Micmac. This is the same regions they live in. So when we see the similarities in cultures, their practices, right, their composition of their society, their language, their flags, everything, and we see that they're living in the same area where these same families have been established since at least the 1066, the Norman invasion of America. Again, no one's starting shit. The only thing the only people are starting shit is the crown trying to steal shit, right? As far as starting things, these families have been here long before America, and again have integrated with the native population. It wasn't as we're described today. The founding fathers were racist. The U.S. Constitution is bullshit. Well, that's a lot of what goes on today in our modern day society and culture. These lies are perpetrated. That's all bullshit, because again, there's obviously a greater history to the matter. These things are framed incorrectly, and again, it's these are ongoing wars, I think, that still go on today. Obviously, so.
Yeah, I found direct evidence in Thomas Paine's book that he said that he basically started the American Revolution to stop slavery. It was I posted on Twitter, but nobody liked it.
No, Thomas Paine was a controversial founding father, was he not?
Well, people don't like him because he wasn't Christian. He wasn't a secular humanist. He was simply a deist. He believed in many gods.
People don't like him because he the Vatican put a smear campaign on him when he wrote a book against their Christianity.
Yeah, he believed that the Old Testament was some sort of fraudulently put together, and it's very interesting. I like reading his stuff. It always makes me laugh. It's well, I'm not laughing at that particular stuff.
Well, he went from that smear campaign by the crown. He went from founding father to no one showed up to his funeral. You know what I mean? So that's the propaganda campaign that went down against Thomas Paine. That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, he went from a beloved figure to everyone fucking hated that guy. That's the smear campaign I'm talking about under these crown matters of the crown history and these anti-liberty elements that we still deal with here in America, despite being the land of the free and the home of the brave. So back to that, Robert de Ross was one of the main Templar knights credited with the Magna Carta. In fact, he's largely credited as the primary dude there on the scene with the Magna Carta in King John's captivity, in which to sign that contract of their land back to the Templar, right? Well, it just so happens that not only is Robert de Ross the forefather to George Washington, so are nine more of those Templar knights that were of the 25. So this is a website called famouskin.com. You can look up a lot of folks on here, presidents and all sorts of folks, witchcraft, royalty, historical, yada, yada, yada. So you can separate it down here by Great Migration, royalty, and Magna Carta, right? So if you look at just the Magna Carta stuff, right? You got Robert de Ross, 15th great grandfather, Quincy, Bigod, Obney, Clare, Robert. So he's from all of these different clans of the Templar Knights, right? All these different groups. De Clare, Fitzwalter, right? Fitzwalter was Fitzwalter and de Ross were the main dudes on that. So and you got Bigod. So what I'm saying is, you see all these families 500 years later, their grandson of these knights is the dude doing the Magna Carta 2.0, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you notice, the two of those heraldries had the lion's paw again.
Yeah.
One of them's at the top. Some say in the book, what's the fourth turning? The guy believed that he believed that every 13
Obney.
generations that the red and blue and then the red one hued. They believe that every 13 generations, roughly, that the people who wanted freedom would take it, and the founding fathers were a generation. This is roughly, it says 15 generations, 15th grandfather. Could have been, boiled down. Who knows who, if it could have been roughly 13 but anyways, technically right now in America, we're sitting in it's like because it doesn't really matter who you vote for. The dollar is still going to be a piece of paper that's not redeemable for 24 grams of silver, and it's not going to be they're still going to have UN wars where people sign up to freaking be victims of the New World Order, and these wars are all unconstitutional. Everything they're doing is unconstitutional, 100%.
Get them out of here. Get them all out of here.
That's why I'm always saying we're slaves in America. We don't have any rights. These people have taken everything that certain secret orders have given to us, and that the modern demonization of the orders is, I believe, it's a psychological operation.
There's probably something true to that.
Yeah, the internationalists. I mean, the fact that Crowley was caught red-handed making an order that was, because the Rosicrucians seem to be proud of America, proud of the Constitution, and that it's a very interesting subject. And technically, they're all Christians, technically, but it's like that Crowley being a psychological special forces officer, and he's making an identical order to copy American Rosicrucianism to make it seem foul, there was it's hard to explain.
Not only that, didn't he take over the OTO, right?
Yeah, he was the OTO, Ordo Templo Orientis. He was also a member of the Golden Dawn, but they pushed him out.
Well, I'm saying he took it over, though, right? Because Theodore Roos was one of the founders of the. Well, but the salient characteristic I'm driving home here, Clint, is what people ignore is Theodore Roos restarted, but the literally Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati and instituted the OTO system, and that's documented.
Excuse me.
But no one talks about these things. Again, Thelema ultimately professes Marxism, right? So what are we talking about here? If we're going to point any fingers at Illuminati now, because I think a lot of the Illuminati stuff in modern day culture was instituted by Robert Anton Wilson, a Discordian who I would argue was an offshoot of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Nonetheless, it's bullshit. So
I think there's two
who did perpetrate a lot of that stuff. Robert Anton Wilson.
Yeah, I don't trust Robert
Anton Wilson. There's probably a number of folks who called him that.
Yeah, Todd's always liking Robert.
But my point being is like,
sorry.
Well, but if Theodore Roos institutes Bavarian Illuminati and incorporates it as OTO, that then Crowley takes on and turns into Thelema and stuff like that, right? Well, what are we talking about here?
We're talking about
you know what I mean? If we're looking for Bavarian Illuminati, there it is, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree that OTO is Bavarian Illuminati. The debauchery.
I mean, what else could it be at that rate?
Yeah, they seem to like to take other orders and then pervert their doctrines, and it's very interesting. It's like I think there's been a battle of secret societies for thousands of years over mankind.
Since day one.
Yeah, I mean, the brotherhoods that started the orders. Cooper believed that they had started the whole secret societies had originally started from cave people who learned how to make fire, and they kept the fire secret so they could get the best women, get the best food,
Sure.
and that throughout time it evolved into a secret
And then they
society
made
of
up stories about the sky gods, right?
yeah, they would always tell the profane some sort of lesser thing like the sun is God, and but meanwhile they were worshiping the star
Well, no,
Sirius.
what you're describing is how we get cults, because then these people that you're describing who are instituting this culture then create silly tales about the alien sky gods that they believe in but have no proof of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they use superstition to blind the masses and go along with the New World Order plan,
Well,
basically.
they make the superstition, Clint.
Yeah.
They're the ones creating the superstition.
Well, that is where the weird anomaly is, because I do believe that they are creating alien propaganda and UFO propaganda, but at the same time, I've seen a UFO and I don't know what to think about it. Well, I mean, technically, I've seen 3 UFOs.
Are you familiar with the work of Carl Jung?
Carl Jung? Yeah, I despise Jung. I think he was.
Are you familiar with this? Yes, sir. Carl Jung.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, well, I mean, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathtub, because he wrote a good book on the modern day UFOs. Basically concluding what you're saying right there. It's not mutually exclusive. Some are real, some are not. Some are basically elements of modern man's machinations, and some are some sort of spiritual, ultra terrestrial type activity.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know about that book. I'm gonna have to check it out. Yeah, it's definitely.
You never heard of that one?
No, I'm not familiar. I just read about him in the psychology books and stuff. The Jungianism is.
Yeah,
I mean, I've heard.
I don't put much weight into that. Flying saucers, a modern day myth of things seen in the skies. To be quite honest with you, I discovered this by reading the congressional record. So in the congressional record, this was entered into it at some point in time. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think there could be supernatural activity going on in the world. That's the only thing that could really explain certain aspects of the
What's
UFO
supernatural?
Well, I would
what's
say
starting America. If these people are already here, what's starting America? If what's natural versus supernatural at that rate? If it's already here.
Well, it's like people like to demonize magic and all this stuff, but like it seemed like the founding fathers may have been into magic or the occult. And,
they're into a lot of weird shit, man. Definitely, for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's like July 4th. Perhaps they had made their battle on that day for a certain astrological, or you know what I mean. But like,
what's up with July 16th?
It sounds familiar. I'm not sure.
July 16th, 1790, George creates Washington, D.C., founds Washington, D.C. July 16th, 1940, was it 44, the creation of the atom bomb, right? July 16th, 1969 was the that giant dick statue, Parson, fueled sex magic ritual, solid state rocket fueled nonsense, the Apollo 11 moon launch. That was July 16th, 1969. So July 16th is a strange date to me. It seems to have a lot of occulted business, especially here in America.
It seems to be the last quarter of the moon. I don't know. Well, I guess that wouldn't be does it come for every year? I have to look at some star charts and let you know, because that's interesting. Usually, whenever the occultists are involved, I always keep star charts handy, because they're always like some of the symbols of the occult they'll have entire trestle boards with imagery, and the entire symbol is simply a date on a calendar, basically. Whereas, for example,
so it's hidden in there, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's like they've got one where it's like, this is the best example, where the keystone is in Cancer, and above it says it's a symbol of Mars, during the summer solstice at the 90-degree mark in the horizon, and it's a lot of the date on the calendar, and that it's the art of that type of thing is very impressive. Like the ability to or it's like a lost art, this surrealist symbolism and hiding of secret days and celestial events and the belief of all this stuff. It's it's very interesting. I can tell that the serious cult took over by the time they made the Washington Amendment, because in the door you see the symbol of Sirius in Egyptian, the sphere with the wings.
Yep. Well, can you hold that thought? Because I would like to talk about how there's this cult of George that gets misconstrued with all these things in America, with the obelisk, the apotheosis of man, etc. But just want a brief intermission here, if you will.
Yeah, that's right.
Paper is down. It's all right, he's just missed. We have a paper down. I repeat, a paper is down.
You were saying, Clint? Oh, we got a guest down. We have a guest down. So as Clint was saying there about the obelisk, I think it's an important factor to note here in these tales of America and there's occultism and these folks that do things around here. George Washington never wrote in his last will and testament, "Please build me a giant dick statue 70 years after I die," or 50 years after I die. I think it's when they started it. "Please build me a giant dick statue in the city that I founded 50 years after I die." Just like he didn't write in his last will and testament, "Please make me a god inside the ceiling of U.S. Congress after I die," in the apotheosis of man. So I do think there is an element of this kind of anti-liberty, kind of pro, old world European crown interests, the globalists, if you will, that there's some folks that wanted George Washington to remain king of America. He's like, "I'm not going to do that." And that's a lot of that story with the character of Cincinnatus and the Society of the Cincinnati. But the mural that I'm referring to that sits inside Congress, that a lot of folks like to claim that George Washington thought he was a god. Well, again, this is after they instituted the giant dick statue, right, of the Washington Monument. I believe, again, that was 1850. This is circa 1865. And they sanctioned this apotheosis of Washington inside the rotunda of the Capitol building, right? So, and at no point in time did George list in his last will and testament, "Build me a giant dick statue and make me a god inside the city that I founded." So that is this. I do think it is this cult of George, that the folks that wanted him to be king, right? This element of folks that would be the backers of Aaron Burr and gang and the coup to take over America and the Burr conspiracy, right? Because Burr's a member of the New York chapter of the society, and he murders Alexander Hamilton in 1804 there, who was the president general after the society, because he became president general July 4th of 1799 when Washington retired. And I believe Washington was also murdered that day. He was poisoned on July 4th of 1799 when he handed over the society to Alexander Hamilton, because in his carriage ride back from Philadelphia to Mount Vernon, he wrote in his journals how sick he got during that carriage ride. This is a totally healthy man. He wasn't retiring due to old age and ill health. He was a very healthy man, farmer. He such a in great physical shape in the current years, the year or so preceding his death. He built 2 70-foot Adena style mounds at the gate of the entrance to Mount Vernon. So this was not a dude who was not into physical labor, right? And he becomes deathly ill there on July 4th, 1799, when he hands the reins of the society over to Alexander Hamilton, who would meet a demise a few years later there when he gets murdered by another society member, Burr. But it is these elements that I would argue that are poisoning Washington, that are killing Hamilton, the Burr backers, if you will, in that case, that is this anti-liberty faction, and it is part of that faction that composes this cult of George.
Interesting.
Because, I think in modern day, much like I say, in modern day conspiracy culture, the Knights Templar are diminished and bashed and misdescribed, etc. And not just in the films in Hollywood, but, generally speaking, they're looked at as an evil organization. And that's crazy to me, because they're literally the people that brought liberty to the Western world. So would you be able to even make these statements about an organization had that organization not brought you liberty? It's kind of a crazy paradox, if you ask me, but it's the same paradox we find when we see them being described as the Prince of Thieves. And I don't want to say that I'm not a fan of this film, because I am a fan of comedies and parodies and whatnot, and Mel Brooks specifically. But let's be honest about the situation. When we're doing these kind of renditions of the situation and not telling the proper tale of how these Knights Templar are the folks that we owe Western liberties to, right? And rights, and we're making things like this to bastardize it. But you couldn't make this film in a culture that didn't have such rights and liberties. So once again, it is a Looney Tunes paradox.
Perfect. Every time.
We're men in tights. We roam around the forest looking for fights. We're men in tights. We run from the rich and give to the poor, that's right. We may look like sin.
I mean, that's a pretty ridiculous rendition. I mean, again, I laugh at it, I enjoy it, but it's a pretty ridiculous rendition if you think about it.
Yeah, it's Mel Brooks. He's a that form of comedy.
Just the idea that you're going to make, you're going to poke fun at all these things, but you couldn't do that in a culture that didn't bring you such rights and liberties. So again, the Templar don't get credit for these things in the proper way in which they should, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, they've definitely been bastardized by the media and the Vatican, especially. The Vatican, like that's why I talk about how when the modern masonry started being accepted into Rome, and when stuff like that, and it's like, well, what about the 32nd degree? Like that means nothing. Like, what is I'm pretty sure it's 32nd. It might be the 31st. There's an oath where they say they condemn
an oath. I'll take an oath.
They condemn the crown of Rome and the Vatican, and it seems very contradictory.
Speaking of oaths, you were describing earlier the oath that was undertaken in a widespread fashion, conducted in secret manners, in which to take down the Templars on Friday the 13th, October the 13th, 1307, which was Friday the 13th, right?
Yeah, they everybody was under penalty of death if they opened the letters that Vatican and Philip had issued, the letters of Marquis or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, you bring up a good point there. I mean, I didn't want to deter you from it before, but I put a pen in it because it is an important point you're making there. But chronologically, we're back to this matter now. So, it is important to think how, logistically speaking, this is quite an endeavor.
Yeah.
To plan and coordinate such a mission at a time when you're using, the modes of travel are not expedient. So, this is probably a couple years in advance planned, right?
You mean America or in general, or?
No, the takedown of the Templar.
Oh, I would say it probably took a minute to coordinate. I mean, once they
a minute, dude. How are you distributing all these letters as you speak of?
Yeah, I guess that is true. It would have taken a while to get them to the by carriage or whatever. It's all around Europe.
You gotta get all your things in order. You gotta get people in different places. You gotta set things up. You know what I mean? You gotta get your, your affair. You gotta dot your lowercase j's and cross your t's here, Clint, and you gotta make sure you get your things in order before you just start trying to take out a powerful military order who knows how to, whose vast wealth and resources are nothing to shake your fist at. Because again, even putting them down, they didn't really put them down. Now, did they?
Yeah. That's why they had to flee all Portugal, because the entirety of Europe had outlawed them, and there was when they were outlawed, there was a cathedral that was built in Scotland that was one of theirs, and it was you can tell by the 8 sides, but like I mean, technically they were involved. The biggest buildings of the times, like Chartres Cathedral, was the whole cathedral is.
I think it's pronounced sharded.
But it was the biggest feat of the world at the time,
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. The Notre Dame Cathedral has connections to the Templars.
Yeah. Each one that was built by the Templars before 1013 had a connection with a type of religion of this surrealism thing with alchemy, and that the symbols in the temple were all to do with, because before there was a quote unquote Bible, the temple was the Bible, the pictures on the walls and stuff. And I do believe that the tarot cards are
right. But these Gothic cathedrals were certainly, this was knowledge that were brought back by the Templars, but specifically the Notre Dame one, the bishop in charge of that one under the construction here, I believe Bishop Marquis de Sully here was the treasurer at one point in time for the Templar order. So this is deep connection. So when we see the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral a few years back, which seemed to be like some sort of terrorist attack based upon some videos I saw of some Middle Eastern looking fellas shaking their fists during the burning of that inside the building. Seemed like that there was a lot more to that tale, but we recently saw the reconstruction of that building following that burning. You familiar with that?
Yeah, I did think it was very curious on why they would, if it was a planned thing, the burning of it, or if it was an attack by some sort of, because it's like, nobody knows.
Dude, it's the modern day crusades. It's the same reason why a number of years ago you had 7 out of the top 10 populated cities in the United Kingdom had a Muslim mayor. And it's the reason why the number 1 name in the United Kingdom last year was Mohammed.
Speculate that perhaps the Hashashim side of the order had decided that it wanted to carry the ball. It wanted the whole cake.
Well, who were they fighting? They were fighting other Islamic folks as well. That's when, again, it's not as well as cut and dry like that. So in the reconstruction of the Notre Dame Cathedral here recently, you familiar with the French president Emmanuel Macron?
I call him Macron.
The secret Rothschild fellow from what appears to be the Trogno chocolate family. They're apparently a branch Rothschild. Yeah, he was the youngest. He was the youngest head of the Rothschild Bank there in France, and apparently, from reports of other folks at that bank, knew nothing about banking. So it would make sense if he is a member of that family, which is a French journalist, is Xavier Rousseau's his name. He's basically that Trogno chocolate family that his alleged wife is from is actually a branch of the Rothschilds. And I say his alleged wife because that same journalist has discovered that Macron's wife, the First Lady of France, is really a dude, and that dude is really his dad. So the first of France, Brigitte Macron, is the husband, father, wife of the president, Emmanuel Macron. But her grandiose idea, Brigitte Macron, the man, husband, wife of the president, she wanted to put a giant dick statue on top of the Notre Dame Cathedral in the reconstruction of it. New phoenix-like cock placed atop Notre Dame Cathedral. That was her idea. It didn't go through, but leave it to the husband, man, wife, lady of the first lady of the first lady, husband, man of France to put a giant dick statue on a cathedral.
By the Templars. I think that since you're on the Rothschild subject,
Since we're talking about giant dick statues
yeah,
and,
Rothschild
husband man wives.
they say that Rothschild owned the land of Sherwood Forest, and with the Templars were, yeah. So they're literally like, well, f him, we're gonna stay in his forest if he wants to take our land.
There you go. There's maybe some deeper connections there we're talking about when this Rothschild is trying to put a giant dick statue on a Templar cathedral. Maybe you're just outlining some of those further details in that deeper argument, that deeper dispute.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been because the Rothschilds secretly married into the house of Saxo-Coburg-Gotha, and that they were the Templar was against the crown. That's why I thought it was so messed up when the Queen of England was a grand pontiff of Freemasonry. It's like, well, how can that be? If Freemasonry is about people, because like it used to be in the olden
people helping
times.
people, right?
Yeah.
Doing neighborhood barbecues, some flea markets. They're just people helping people.
Yeah, it's like the there was a battle.
I'm being facetious. They're obviously, you know what I mean. Like Freemasonry, these other organizations in America. They're like, oh, we just do bake sales. We do community fundraisers.
In modern times, they do things like put communists in office, such as Obama.
Obama. I believe his name's Barry Satoro, the son of a Islamic sex cult leader from Indonesia.
Yeah, I think. Excuse me. Yeah, one of the things was saying it was the guy was some kind of royalty of Indonesia.
It's pretty well documented. The lady that released his birth certificate, Loretta Fuddy, she was the head of that Islamic sex cult in America, the Subud cult in America. She was the head of it. Barry's parents have connections to it. Were like members. And Sotero there was the Rockefeller guy in Indonesia, his stepfather. So, I mean, we're talking about the same shit, these same families, right? The Rockefellers, you know what I mean? Obama's got, his mother's got, blue blood heritage of the, the Massachusetts Bay variety, the English variety. So he's got, some weird kind of Dutch and, English, heraldry there as far as this occultism that goes through these groups and that manifests today when you see Barry's mother and, the Rockefeller guy Satoro, apparently linking up with this Islamic sex cult in Indonesia, the Subud sex cult. And Barry just happens to look like the sex cult leader, Muhammad Subud. He just happens to look like that dude. They look identical. It's hard to say it's not his dad. And then the lady that releases his birth certificate happens to be the head of that cult in America. And then she just happens to die in a emergency plane landing in the water there in Hawaii, where the other government officials on the little plane that she was on, they all got out of the plane. They all had life preservers on, but somehow Loretta Fuddy, there's video evidence of it. Somebody was recording on their camera, their cell phone. When that plane hit the water, you see Loretta Fuddy, but the story goes she didn't make it back to land, even though she had a life preserver on. So everyone else survived. So it's hard to say it's hard for me to believe that story ain't true with all those details. You know what I mean?
The Indonesia cult is. I think the Indonesia cult is some kind of off branch of theosophy or something. And
Sufi. It's definitely Sufi stuff. So back to this Templar stuff. So the Templars and Sufis, they borrowed and traded a lot of their occult concepts and ideas, supposedly, right? I don't have a great grasp of it, but from my understanding, that's the case. The hashish assassins, right? Their mysticism matched together with the Knights Templar mysticism, so that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's very that article.
French president's husband, father, wife proposed phallus and golden balls for Notre Dame rebuild. That's what I'm saying, dude. How ridiculous! But this is what I'm getting at. You're saying this is the Sherwood Forest connections to the Rothschilds, and we got more Rothschilds and Templar stuff here. Dude, that's what I'm saying. These are elements of a secret ongoing war for millennia.
Yeah. I think there was a female order of Weishaupt's Illuminati that was created. I've seen documentation of it in Nesta Webster's book, World Revolution, and that I believe that the order is operating through women in modern times on high places of positions of power. and the such as like Oprah or something, because Oprah's in one of these. Oprah thinks she's God or whatever, and I can't remember the name of that cult that she's in, but
Oh, I think it's called Schindler's List.
well, technically, Schindler's List was a fictional story. It was based on things that were true, but the whole story is fiction.
You mean to tell me, sir, there was no list?
Yeah. Well, there was an IBM. Yeah.
That's just like Anne Frank, dude. That whole shit's all nonsense too. So what else is new, right? Everything, you just make shit up, dude.
Well, the
So
book is highly. The Anne
this
Frank
cheery
book
fella
is-
right here is Barry's dad. This is Mohammed Subud, right?
Yeah, that does
This
look
chipper
like
fella.
him. Skull
This is the
structure.
Subud chapter of Chicago. So this one probably where Barry was attending, right?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it looks just like him, dude. It looks just like I have a. Please continue. I have a photo I'll bring up here in a comparison. I don't have it
How
here
many
on my
rings
computer,
does
though.
that symbol have on it there? The 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Yeah, I would suspect that that's a Theosophist, because the Theosophists always have 7 in their symbolism. Because
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me bring that back. Let me bring that back. You're looking at their symbols.
Yeah, that symbol right there, the 7 rings, the 7 degrees of classism. That's what they're talking
Yeah.
about. In the initiations, they take off symbolic robes in some of the initiations that the Theosophist Elvin Boyd Kuhn Kuhn wrote about,
And Simon and Theodore.
Yeah, he was a 33rd degree Mason and doctorate in Theosophy, and I think that these orders, because it's like Massey, the encyclopedia writer of Freemasonry, he explains, that it's called Encyclopedia in Kindred Sciences. So every order is a kindred science of Freemasonry, and so
Right.
the signs, symbols, and passwords match up. And that
Well, we see that with Philemon and Golden Dawn too, right? As you were saying, these are the elements of Freemasonry were instituted in both of those systems. Elements of Freemasonry were instituted in Mormonism. So what you're saying seems to kind of be the pattern, right?
Yeah, everything seems to copy Masonry basically, and
right.
It's like the Masonic Brotherhood had split, where I found a split in the order in 1890. Where some prince got held up to some high position and everybody left World Freemasonry, and then it was downhill from there. But like the order, it's like there was still there's people who are on the table with me still who are Grand Masters of Freemasonry, but who specifically wrote and condemned
Grandmaster Funk.
Well, who wrote? He might have been in one of those cults, but who?
I'm sure, dude. Dude. I think all those early hip hop guys were New Wabian folks, right?
Well, their first concerts, they had big giant fake spaceships. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, dude. And Dwight York and his New Wabian alien cargo cult got along with George Clinton and his process church cargo cult nonsense, ancient alien cargo cult nonsense. That's what I'm saying, dude. So you know what I'm talking about.
Hold the flashlight up like they were getting beamed up.
You know what I'm talking about.
And then the concert venues being the flashlights for their activity, and so that's when the lighters came out. They all started the lighters, holding the lighters at the concert. It's like it's like the modern pop culture and stuff, even the like stuff like Grateful Dead and stuff. It's like they have a secret society without any official paperwork. There's no referendum or.
Well, speaking of official paperwork, the Prince Hall Freemasons, that New Wabian nation of Dwight York, they have their own quote unquote official Grand Lodge system within Prince Hall Freemasonry. So they're a powerful order.
Yeah. Yeah, I speculate this cargo alien stuff is I think it's the same thing as this consciousness from Sirius thing that they talk about.
It's absolutely the same thing. That's
why
why the Mormons say, that's why the Mormon God they claim lives, Elohim, their God lives on the star Kolob, or the planet Kolob next to in the Sirius star system there. So it's incorporated in all these myths.
Yeah, that's hopefully we don't get murked for talking about this.
We're absolutely getting murked for talking about all of this. So
Yeah.
as we close, I appreciate your time and conversation on all these matters, Clint. We'll bring us here. We'll bring us in here as a close, and I'll let you have some closing statements here as well. But this is a great representation, I think, an exhibit of Barry Satorio here in his comparison to his real dad, Muhammad Subud.
That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty. I went to Kindle Art School, and that'd say that's pretty right on.
Right.
That father.
Well, if you want to get real weird with it, the Indonesian president at the time also appears to have been a son of that same cult leader. Perhaps a topic for a different day. So this is Loretta Fuddy. She was the appointed official within the Hawaii Department of Health that released the quote-unquote infamous birth certificate, the multi-layered digital copy from a 1960s birth certificate.
Yeah,
digital copy, layered digital copies. Get the fuck out of here. The idea
Yeah.
that it would even be digital and layered is ridiculous.
Well, I was all over the Joe Arpaio when they released the press things, and no, the news didn't cover any of it, and it was so huge. It was
right.
I was like, holy cow, because my aunt lives down in that county where Joe Arpaio's county, and it was like it was amazing. It was like, wow, somebody's doing something. You know what I mean? Like they're investigating something. But yeah.
So, Hawaiian official who released Obama's birth certificate dies in crash. So, Loretta Fuddy, a Hawaiian health official who in 2011 was briefly in the national spotlight when she verified the authenticity of Barry Satorio's birth certificate and authorized the release of information about it, died Wednesday in the crash of a small plane off the island of Molokai cocktail. There was 8 passengers aboard. Went down Wednesday in the water off the Hawaiian island. The Maui Fire Department said, Maui Fire Department. I wonder if that one dude was involved. The others on board, no, he was in Vegas, wasn't he? That one Maui police chief was in Vegas at that time. It says there was videos of this, dude. There was videos of this. So the plane hits the water, an emergency landing, allegedly. The videos, someone's in the water. You see 7 or 8 people, like it describes. They're all in life preservers. You see Loretta Fuddy's face. Whoever's filming it was almost like a proof of life. It's almost like, hey, here she is. They're sending that video to somebody, and then they murked her or something. Because that's how, they were right in her face, like, hey, here's Loretta Fuddy. And then, the news report says, oh, she didn't make it. Everyone else got back to shore fine with their life preservers on, not Loretta Fuddy. So how she died has never really been described. But she was the head of that Islamic sex cult in America. The Subud, like I said, the Subud Chicago business is the Chicago chapter that Barry likely attended. And again, there's his dad.
Yeah, there's a Baha'i temple there too, I'm pretty sure.
It's a big Baha'i temple there.
Yeah.
It's their main one, right? In America?
It's either there in Indiana. There's a couple.
I think it's up there on the Lake Michigan, right?
I think there's one in Ohio too. It's weird how they would choose the Midwest.
There's a Baha'i spot right down the street from Dave Chappelle's comedy club. So speaking of the Nation of Islam, Scientology, ancient alien cargo cults, that's Dave Chappelle. All the Nation of Islam got signed up to Scientology, so officially he's a Scientologist. And just down the street from his comedy club in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is not far from me, is a Baha'i Faith Center. So they're everywhere, but I think the main one here is the Wilmette one in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, Baha'ism is rebranded Theosophy, and that it's like the UN was made by Theosophists, and that it's like they created Baha'ism, and that the UN says it only sanctions Baha'i religion, and that Baha'i religion
isn't this just an extension of the Rothschilds?
Well, this religion is secular humanism, where the initiate becomes Christed, and they are told that they are part of the God within or something. It's like the Sirius cults all lead to this place where they believe their consciousness is coming from the star Sirius, and that it's, according to its highest writers, that it's the fruit of the tree of the serpent, and that the consciousness of they believe that man was 2 parts, that man started off as an animal, and that the consciousness of God came in them or some shit. And it's
Right,
all a bunch of mesmerism. It's
May I interject? When you were saying Oprah's cult, I didn't know you, dude. She's connected to Subud. Are you kidding me?
yeah, she's a high ranking occultist. I've said this.
Holy shit! Well,
years
that
ago.
explains her connections to Obama in Chicago, dude. They go deep into Subud stuff. Why wouldn't she want to be friends with the cult leader's son?
Yeah, she's a secular humanist. She believes she's God.
I didn't know she had connections to Subud, dude. That's wild, dude.
Yeah, the whole secular humanism thing. The conspiracy is huge. That's what's backing communism is secular humanism, and it's like they gain their initiates by imitating religions and having good sales pitches, and it's like the New World Order religion is Baha'ism. I've been preaching against it for 17 years. It's scary. It's they use things such as what is that called? They brainwash the people with certain ideologies such as situational ethics, whereas they get the initiate to believe something is okay.
Well, that's nihilism.
Yeah,
right?
It's
when you say situational ethics, you're creating a situation where ethics don't matter. That's nihilism.
Yeah, they rationalize out ethics and
I didn't mean I wasn't trying to be rude to interrupt you there, Clint. I'm just saying, like, when we get down to these semantics, we're talking these words are invented so we discuss and argue about these words, but really if you just boil down to the greatest common denominator here at Operation GCD, right?
Yeah.
Also garbage can do, but greatest common denominator is kind of how I look at things, and it's nihilism, man. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
When we're told, like, this is how I look at flat Earth too. Like the idea that I'm not saying I don't believe anything NASA says, but to replace it with another false narrative is not a solution. And I think what you get at with these matters of the perpetration of flat Earth by likely the CIA, who first came up with the idea in their papers in the 60s, it appears. They as far as the modern day incarnation of that, it is at least the modern day versions of narratives all seem to erupt from CIA documents in the 60s, but nonetheless, this nihilism, dude. These are communist principles, but what they're espousing is nihilists don't believe in anything, which is essentially what communism is, right? You don't believe in anything. Yeah. There is no God, but you don't believe in anything really at that point.
So my flat Earth friend, I'm telling him about this consciousness stuff with these theosophists, like blah blah blah, and he said has some like hippie term for it or something, and I'm like, oh Jesus, they got to you.
Yep, they got you. Get them out of here. Get them all out of here.
It's their space alien religion, basically. That I'm just going with the term because it describes
ancient alien
really well.
Stuff. Yep.
It's like their mainstream symbolism is all tattoos. They've got this huge MO going on where they all think they're gods. They all smell like patchouli. The
patchouli farts. Yep. Patchouli farts. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely
like patchouli farts in here.
Do not like patchouli. Yeah.
Every time I go to Yellow Springs, smells like patchouli farts in here. It's a big hippie town. Where that Baha'i Faith Center is, where Chappelle lives.
Oh, whoa!
It's a big hippie town. Always has been.
Yeah, that Baha'ism is the people that made Baha'ism.
Smells like patchouli farts around there.
Yeah.
So, if I may offer a couple closing statements before I turn the tables over to you there, Clint, and I do appreciate your time, sir. Discussions on these matters and why it's relevant to today. I think I've hit that highlighted why it's relevant in a couple points, but relative, more specifically, more targeted, why it's relative to today. If you recall, Donald Trump went over to the United Kingdom on a quote-unquote unofficial state visit in 2018 on Friday, July 13th, and created a bunch of ruckus. That ruckus was because he visited the Queen for an afternoon tea. Trump leaves London after wreaking diplomatic destruction because he famously, after having tea with the Queen in front of the entire world watching, he decided he's going to walk in front of the Queen on her own grounds. That's a power move, I would argue. That's a Templar power move that he did on Friday the 13th in a quote-unquote unofficial state visit. He then went to Scotland for the next couple of days following this unofficial state visit. So I would argue these matters are very, very relative today within these disputes for America's liberty, and they are, at least in part. Again, you can folks and often, when I make these arguments, I do think Trump is pro-liberty. I think you would agree with me on that. We've discussed that a lot of times. And again, then it gets into what is liberty. You know what I mean? If you want to start dictating what other lands' liberties are and whatnot. So there are, I think that's where people get lost in. But nonetheless, I do think this man is pro-liberty. And again, I do think he obviously does come from some of this Templar heritage. His mother was from Clan MacLeod there in the Highlands of Scotland. But yeah, this was a power move in my opinion, right? This was a power move,
Yeah.
And this was the time he went over there and made a bunch of statements about Brexit, right? During this visit publicly to the media. This is the time when Boris Johnson, the American who was appointed as the British Prime Minister, right? Who was elected as a British Prime Minister, right? He was half American. Well, he's actually American. He was born in America. His parents were British. He had dual citizenship, but he was born in America. And his ancestor, Johnson, he also comes from the Knights Templar. And his ancestor, Johnson, was one of those other lieutenants with the Lieutenant's Vance of William the Conqueror in the from the Norman invasion of the UK back in 1066. So these are very long-standing disputes and arguments, right?
Yeah. It's very well, I did want to add because everybody hates on Trump so much, but it's like I've never in my whole life seen anyone go to the UN and say you can't take 24% of federal income tax for your war machine. And he also addressed the Disarmament Act of the UN. I don't know if he was addressing it officially or unofficially, but he said you will not take away America's Second Amendment. And technically, I would argue that we already had it taken away, but the UN wants total disarmament. They signed Department Publication 7277 and like 1963 or 4 or something by JFK, and I think that's possibly why JFK got deleted, because he signed that thing, and which that's a long story. Because
I would argue once again we're talking to the Society of the Cincinnati Tale with JFK. You got JFK, a member of the society by virtue of being president. His father-in-law was apparently Jackie's father, Jack Black Bouvier, appears to be a double member of both the French chapter and the Maryland chapter of the society. And on top of that, you have Lee Harvey Oswald, who also appears to be a hereditary member of the society via the Georgia chapter. So I would argue that's a very much society-related situation. I would also argue JFK Jr. likely inherited, well, there was no other males to pass it on to from Jack Black Bouvier. So he definitely got the Maryland chapter membership in the Society of Cincinnati, and he likely, again, probably got dual membership with the French chapter. But nonetheless, all of these matters, I would argue, revolve around the society and these Templar families again. So the JFK situation being no different. But as far as Trump's activities go, I mean, again, there's a lot of things, a lot of ins and outs, a lot of what have yous in these subjects. But I do believe the man ultimately has pro-liberty American independent interest in mind, and a lot of his, especially his overarching strategic goals. And that's why I think you have Steve Bannon running around, has been for a couple of years now, telling everybody that Donald Trump is the modern day Cincinnatus. He makes that statement repeatedly on his show and in speeches.
That's interesting.
The man, already a member of the society. Trump's a member from his first term. So you have a guy. Bannon doesn't appear to be a member, but I can't be certain of that. And here's why I say that. I had no idea Jack Black Bouvier was a member until I stumbled across some records, largely due to Heidi Love over at the Unfiltered Rise podcast, who was doing some deep dives on the Kennedy situation, specifically Jackie, and pointed me in that direction. And I found all the records there in the Maryland chapter, and I suspect the French chapter as well. But nonetheless, membership gets passed down in this organization, this knighthood, this new Knights Templar, right? Gets passed down in interesting ways sometimes. So Jack Black Bouvier's great-grandfather was a member, right? So his mother's father. So his great-grandfather was a member, but had no sons to pass it down to. So it went to his daughter, She had no sons to pass it down to through her daughter, and then you find your way to Jacques Bouvier. So these things happen sometimes. This is why Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, was a hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati because his mother was an American and her father had no one to pass it down to. Put in the paternal line.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what if they're in direct conflict with Freemasonry or going with them. I remember
Which kind of Freemasonry?
The Scottish Rite, for example.
So you have the Scottish Rite, then you have that blend of that dude who came into France, Andrew Ramsay, and was allegedly a member of the Priory Scion, best friends with Sir Isaac Newton, and who was allegedly the head of the Priory Scion at that time, and Alexander Pope. And these were his social circle. This is the guy that introduces Freemasonry to France, which becomes the Grand Lodge of, damn it, I always forget this one. What's the French one that was involved in the revolutions?
Oh, the Grand Orient Temple.
Grand Orient Lodge. So you have this Scottish Rite influence that molds together with this kind of Martinism aspects that are going on there with this Solomonic magic of Martinism in France, and these things all match together and create this Grand Orient Lodge. And this is the lodge that seems to be most associated with these families of founding fathers and Templars society folks, right?
Yeah, the French thing is incredibly complex. It's it's interesting because from the point of John J. Robinson's perspective, he said that he was the 45th degree member of Freemasonry, and it wasn't the Rite of Mizraim, and that it wasn't any of the rites known to the public, and that I do believe there's multiple orders of Freemasonry that are concealed, and that they because like the rite of Mizraim, for example, that goes up to 99 or something. It's just a rite that's kind of like an offshoot of the Grand Orient, but like it's like there was a point in time where I think it was like 1600s or so, or 1500s.
This seems like propaganda, Clint, if I may just interject. This seems like propaganda. By the way, everyone, Gulf of Tonkin alleged incident actually did happen. C.W. Carroll, 7-year communist. I'll look into that reference. It sounds preposterous. I've read a lot on that subject, and I'm not sure what evidence that this alleged, looks like communist propaganda itself is trying to report happen. That's the incident where Jim Morrison's dad faked the attack that Lyndon B. Johnson would then sign ground troops to in January '64, magically just after Kennedy was murdered. But nonetheless, I think I appreciate the feedback. I'll look it up. It seems like silliness if you ask me, but I don't know the reference, so I'll have to look at that.
That's UN intervention. The UN, it's like no troops since the UN treaty was signed. No troops see action unless they're U.S. or UN forces under Article 43 of the Charter. And that in the peace.
Well, we had the Korean War. The Korean War fought under the auspices, like you're saying, of United Nations actions, and we have a Russian general on both sides of the Korean War. What the fuck's that about?
Yeah, they were. Well, that's because
you have a Russian leading the communists. You have a Russian leading the Americans. What are we doing here?
Well, that's the Security Council's undersecretary has always been a Russian communist, and that he's leading both sides.
How preposterous that looks. I mean, just look at it like that, right? You just look at it like that.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's ridiculous.
That's how it always has been. That's why it's treason against the War Powers Clause of the Constitution, which says Congress has the power to wage war. It doesn't list the United Nations has the power, and that so when they signed into the UN treaty, they violated the Constitution, and the UN's Cooper proves exclusively with Supreme Court rulings that the U.S. Constitution must yield to the UN Charter. Thus, there is no America. That's why
I don't like the sound of that. I don't like the sound of that just as much as I don't like the sound of this giant dick statue on top of the cathedral.
Yeah, it's
so
like
in regards to all the Magna Carta, Knights Templar, Robin Hood business, and U.S. Constitution, what are your thoughts on all these subjects we've discussed here tonight? As far as anything you want to, any high points or elements you would like to elaborate on or provide some closing bookends on, if you may.
Well, it's like secret societies throughout time have been battling against each other. One trying to enslave mankind, the other trying to free mankind, and that it's like the Constitution was drafted to, in Thomas Paine's words, to stop slavery. It's drafted to all the rights of the King of England, and that the everything that's we've ever lived in has been totally unconstitutional and unlawful. And
John McCain's father. Oh, I apologize. John McCain's father, the member of the Society of the Cincinnati. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, the McCain boys. They were McCain's father and grandfather were the only two father and son 4-star generals. They were admirals, 4-star general equivalent admirals that we had in American history. These are a powerful bunch. That's all I'm saying. Well, hereditary members, right, of the society.
Oh, yeah. Well, Cooper.
I'll look more into that. I just that sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, Cooper thought McCain was compromised because of the communist captivity with thumb screws. He believes that McCain was the Manchurian candidate. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly possible. I'm just saying he was a member. John McCain was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati.
Oh yeah. But basically it's like the whole UN thing. It's like the UN is this
McCain's father and his grandfather, they were the only 4-star generals. I'm not good with Navy ranks. I'm a retired Air Force guy. I don't do Siemens.
Yeah.
But they were 4-star admiral folk, only father and son duo in American history, and they're both members, hereditary members. Society of Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's interesting. My friend that was in the army, he said that it was all, or he said you could tell there was rank type stuff going on with certain people. And I don't know, but it's like the whole thing about the Constitution. It's like the founding fathers had they had been students of history, and they had seen the turmoils of human suffering through Europe and when they had started the Constitution. It was a mix of the Masonic Constitution and the Native Americans system of government. So it was the most advanced contract that have ever been written up, and that advanced in a way to whereas no contract before it had simply listed the powers of government. Instead, the contracts would always list what the government couldn't do, and so the laws and agreements would be.
That's construed. A good point. That's a salient characteristic there. That's one of the lessons they learned from the Magna Carta of the U.S. Constitution, with the phrasing of limitations of government and power.
Yeah, because that's why that example of the an officer of the state not having the power to press charges against someone if they were the sole witness to a crime, because you don't know if they're lying or not, and that because that's the type of shenanigans that would go on.
Dude. Courts. I was saying, and they're back to it, right? In modern, you're right. That's about you beat me to it. They're back to it, right? We've circled back to that same shenanigans.
Yeah, it's good kind. There was a book written in 1774 called it wasn't the Common Sense one. It was called the Rights of the British in England, or Rights of the British in the 13 Colonies. And it was written by I think it was Jefferson. I can't remember which, but it spoke of admiralty courts controlling the land, and that the people were victims of, because anybody who was in the courts would just abuse their power. And it's like the modern courts have turned into the same courts where on the record in court, I put the judge on the spot asking him about the jurisdiction, and then I caught him in a lying what the jurisdiction was, and I proved that in the court that there was no such jurisdiction. And then, but basically they still deprived me of my rights. But like it's like the courts are operating on unconstitutional levels, and Rupert Sheldrake, or no, Ralph Epperson says it best, where he asked his federal judge friend, he said, he was asking about the law and stuff, and his federal judge friend told him, that all judges in the U.S. are under silent judicial notice to withhold from the public that they are to rule in favor of the UN stuff. The Constitution was null and void, and that the it's the scariest thing that you could ever hear, because it's like, so, because if there's no Constitution, because the Constitution is the operating system of America, of government, and the Constitution is literally our government, that people swear on it, and that that for them to say that the UN Charter violates the War Powers Clause, for them to say that that's the supreme law of the land, that's treason technically under Article or Title 18, Section. I forget the section. But
it's almost like you're saying the government can come in and steal your shit, take all your property, and then a sheriff can enforce legal orders and laws in which restrict your liberties. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're slaves.
That sounds like the tale of Robin Hood from about 800 years ago, Clint. I'm just going to tell you right now. It sounds very familiar.
They could confiscate everything you own. They could come in and delete me for no reason, just sitting here doing a podcast.
Right. Well, and then it's, and this has all been carved out through political mechanisms and measures in which to eliminate that Constitution that I was saying folks hate around here, these anti-liberty factions at least. And that is through the measures and mechanisms of the National Security Act of 1947, which has eradicated free speech in America. You cannot have free speech with the National Security Act of 1947. So until it gets revoked and repealed, which could happen through much like the way prohibition was repealed through ratification of states' constitutions and then the U.S. law amendment, it's the same difference. So we got to get rid of that before we have free speech. But we only see the further eradication of such rights through the Patriot Acts and FISA courts and FISA courts. The thing that they could have secret proceedings on a U.S. president that was orchestrated by elements of MI6 that later testified in secret hearings in U.S. Congress. Yet somehow we're a free country.
Yeah, well, it's like Cooper in his UN investigations, he had started. He had sent out thousands and thousands of Freedom of Information Acts, and he had found that the charters of almost every acronym organization besides the Bureau, like I'm talking like FCC to fucking the A to the T to the F, like they were all chartered by the 62nd Trust of the International Monetary Fund in Puerto Rico, and the International Monetary Fund is the United Nations, and that the to all sorts of laws and stuff have us signing into international jurisdictions, and that these international jurisdictions, such as the 1099 form, 1040, such as a simple background check, these forms enter you into an international jurisdiction under UN law, and that the Constitution must yield to the UN law in the Supreme Court cases, and it's insane, because it's like it's like my old lady, her uncle was like, he was a U.S. Marshal and he was an IRS agent, and fucking he didn't realize that he was working for the UN, and his check came from the International Monetary Fund and stuff, and like the it's crazy. We're living in a time where, because Cooper said one day that the New World Order will come and fucking finish that Department Publication 72.7, and that it's like they're coming for. Trump called it out on him. He went to the UN and said, "You can't take the Second Amendment from my country," but I don't think he's privy to the intel where they've already taken it, because the background check is UN, and that all those organizations are UN, and that it's like Cooper was he had gotten the evil eye on him because he tried to sue the IRS, and that this was before he knew the IRS was UN. This is before he knew all this stuff, and that he would have the international agents come to his house, and he would be like, well, I'm a state citizen, you don't have jurisdiction over me, come arrest me, please, you know. And that they would never do it because they knew that he was right. And that but like it's like they have everybody in this system on a need to know basis, and all these people that work for these companies and stuff that are chartered by the UN that call themselves our government but are not enacted into law under Title 26 of United States Code, such as the IRS. Because if you can go to the code and go to Title 26 and IRS, you'll see in the books or in the websites that it says that it's never been enacted into law. And so anything that's not enacted into law can only be enforced in federal jurisdiction. And that what they've done is in legalese, there was a conspiracy against our Constitution that started with the 13th Amendment, where the original 13th Amendment said that no officer of government shall be a member of any international, shall have no titles of nobility from foreign nation. Talking about the secret societies.
Yep.
And then it was replaced with another. Then the 14th Amendment was created, which was to supposedly get rid of slavery, but instead it turned everybody into slaves, basically, because then they were under the jurisdiction pursuant to Erie County versus Erie versus Rollins. No, damn it, I'm buzzed. The Erie Railroad versus Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure that court case was a case that determined jurisdiction of a federal train on state property, and that the Supreme Court basically ruled that the 14th Amendment created a duality of citizenship, which then, with that duality of citizenship, with a state citizen being a federal citizen as well, they were privy to Article 1, Section 10, which states Congress has the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. And then it says within 10 square miles, talking about the jurisdiction. And so the 14th Amendment took away the 10 square mile clause, which then thus enabled Congress to legislate in all cases whatsoever with no limitations. And so when they did so, they had created statute laws, and they did things like replace the judicial they replaced the entire judicial
system.
Yeah, they replaced it with the Justice Department, which to this day is the head of the Justice Department.
One big ass blast. It's one big ass blast.
The Attorney General is appointed by the executive branch, and so it's like we're sitting on this giant unconstitutional mess that
you ain't kidding.
Yeah, well, my remedy is to sue them, because we could sue them.
In whose court? The ones they run? Get out of town, fella.
Well, that's where we got to be smooth, we
gotta get a Muppet court if we're gonna do this. We gotta get ourselves a Muppet court for that one.
But so we sue them under writ quo warranto, which demands under court order for them it subpoenas them to show their authority that they have to do something, and if they can't show their authority, they have to cease and dismiss or pay up. So like
I hear you, sir, and I'm not arguing or disputing the factual basis of your statements. What I am saying, however, is I've worked in all aspects of the law. I've seen it. If you go in there doing that, friend, you're going to find yourself with a real big ass blast.
Yeah, I've also had been made an example of by courts. I know how they operate. It's very sad how there's no honor in America. It's like you can find more honor in a homeless person on the street than fucking somebody.
You can find more honor in the Muppets. I can tell you that much. Well, I do appreciate the discourse and all the conversation this evening, Clint, and folks of the interwebs want to check out or hear more of Clint's wealth of information on matters of the U.S. Constitution. As you can tell, if you would like to hear more of that, I highly recommend you check out his YouTube channel, The Third World Assassin. And we have some epic conversations there on the weekends. But in between, Clint covers a lot of Bill Cooper stuff with these globalist, communist, Illuminati kind of takeovers, and the anti-liberty stuff of that are fighting against America that Cooper did such a diligent job of covering over the years. in a time when really no one else was, right? So, he was kind of a pioneer in that regard. But you do a good job over there, sir. I appreciate your time here this evening. Do you have any final remarks here before we call her night?
I guess I think everybody should listen to the Mystery Babylon series, the extended one that's on the houroftheTime.com website. But it's in the audio sets, but like I noticed a lot of podcasters are so anti-American. It's very it's good to see other people that are pro-Constitution and not brainwashed into some kind of quasi-anarchy
for sure
stuff.
No, I'm for sure. No, I agree, dude. And I know what you mean. There's a lot of anti-liberty, anti-founding father, anti-American nonsense that goes on in modern times. Find it all a lot of it preposterous. But, again, when it comes to what is liberty, at the end of the day, you got to almost have to recognize here that the president, University of Idaho president, Coomer Scott Green, who allegedly, according to this T-shirt he's wearing here, is the Kappa Sigma fraternity's butt chugging champ of 1984. You have to recognize that some folks are going to butt chug in this nation of liberty.
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely check out.
I appreciate your time, Clint, and I'll put your links in the show notes, sir. And then folks of the interwebs, I'll be thanks for joining us here tonight, of course, and join in here in the discussion. Hope folks of the interwebs enjoyed the show here, and we want to enjoy another show tomorrow night. Kane B's The Purge, talking Idaho 4 business, and the Muppet Gang here with Coomer Scott Green. And Fridays, Cult Rejects and Operation GCD Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Times, wherever you're watching or hearing this. And Sundays, same deal. Well, that's not the same deal, but Operation GCD Sundays, you can only be found on my Patreons. But I will have a preview of the Patreon show available here on all the same places you're watching and or listening to this here now. And then next Wednesday, Clint, I got Troublemaker Jonah joining me, talk some Operation PatCon, the white nationalist group known as the Order out of Northern Idaho, and their relations to these matters. But I actually met Jonah over there on your show, numerous conversations. I enjoy his perspectives and insight. But yeah, so folks, the interwebs enjoy not only the constitutional stuff. Like I said, Clint talks a variety of topics over there, including having guests like Jonah over there, and myself as routine guests over there.
Oh yeah, well, take it easy.
Yes, sir. Thank you again for joining me here to get GCD, Clint. We'll see you next time.
Oh yeah,
folks, the interwebs.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, well, check your six. Look in that garbage can, because you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.